is Techstrong TV.
We're live. Hey everyone, welcome. We're live here in Amsterdam at KubeCon EU 2023. I'm Alan Schimmel, I'm the CEO of Techstrong Group. And look, you may know us as Techstrong and Techstrong TV. You may follow us as DevOps.com or Security Boulevard. Maybe you followed us over the years with our cloud native themed site, which was Container Journal. I'm really happy to announce that as of today, Container Journal is now cloud native now. And so you can still get to it at Container Journal, but the name of the site is now cloud native now. And we think that better fits what the mission of cloud native now is, which is this, right? You guys can't see it because you're in the background, but Eduardo and I are looking out on a sea of people who have opened up here as the expo floor just opened. And there's, I know it's sold out this year, KubeCon EU. So I think it's about 7,000 or?
Well, today they announced 10,000 people.
10,000 people, crazy, 10,000 people here.
Yeah, and we started yesterday with Observability Day, a co-located event. And yeah, Observability plus other co-located events, they had around 2,000 people.
Fantastic.
So it was amazing experience.
Yep, in person is back. Well, let me introduce you. I've already started pumping them for information. Eduardo Silva. Eduardo is with Calyptia.
Yeah, my name is Eduardo Silva. I'm the CEO of Calyptia, one of the founders of the company. Actually, most of the people in this conference knows me because I'm the creator of FluentBit, maintainer of the project for a long time. And after some time after we started the project, the enterprise started knocking the doors, and they wanted to, hey, give us more, right? Give us more for the enterprise. So we started Calyptia with my co-founder Anurag Gupta, and here we are.
Excellent, excellent. So, Eduardo, let's say some of the people out here, they're not familiar with the project. How would you describe, let's start with the name slowly, because with all the noise it's hard.
Yeah.
And what's the project about?
Yeah, in the open source side exists this project called FluentD that was started around 2011, right? And after a few years, I joined the company where FluentD was created, what was called Treasure Data. I created a new project which called FluentBit, which was kind of the next generation for FluentD for the future. And well, both projects, at that time at Treasure Data, we decided that the projects got a lot of traction, they were open source, and we decided to donate them to the CNCF. Context, Kubernetes was kind of new, Docker was new, Prometheus was around, so FluentD was kind of the first projects that joined the foundation. And yeah, looking forward, FluentBit was started in 2015. After a couple of years, everybody started adopting Kubernetes, microservices, and one of the biggest problems that people wanted to solve is like you got a lot of applications, all of them generate ton of log information, all of them in different formats from different sources, but your problem is that you want to analyze your data.
Yes.
So if you have everything distributed, how do you analyze? And the first approach was, hey, let's try to centralize information in a database so we can query the database and run analytics. Right? Maybe in the enterprise that is called mostly a SIEM. So you have something that centralizes information, you can run analytics. And one of the problems was like nobody had a specific tool to collect data from different sources, different formats, and be able to unify them in a database. So FluentD was one of the first solutions available in the market for that and made in open source. And FluentBit was just like a new architecture based on FluentD, based on the experience, but times performant and times lightweight.
I love it. Let's talk about this. FluentD, it was one of their early projects. Is it graduated at this point, or is it still incubated, sandbox? What's the status?
At that time, FluentD joined as an incubated project, and it was graduated around 2018-19.
Yes. Yeah. That's what I remember. And again, I think most of our audience at Cloud Native now knows of FluentD, but to give them a sense of the scale of the amount of users, the amount of downloads, the amount of contributors, what numbers do you think really kind of drive home how widespread this is?
Actually, that's a really good question because we have a big problem. We have around 6.3 billion downloads in total, just FluentBet. And I say that it's a problem because you imagine that more users, more fans, more requests, more bugs, right?
Let's say that again. 6.3 billion with a big
as of today.
Downloads. My God.
Just FluentBet. FluentD, yeah, we just lost the count.
We don't even count FluentD.
No,
That's
we
just
can't now.
That's crazy. Crazy.
Yeah.
So we're here with 10,000 of our friends at Cloud Native Con, KubeCon. What's new with FluentD, FluentBet, and Calyptia here for the show?
Yeah, so from the FluentBet side, we just releasing FluentBet 2.1. One of the biggest effort and has been asked by community and companies is have a better integration with other ecosystems. So FluentBet is not just a solution for logs, also does metrics and traces. But the way that it does it, that it connects to Prometheus, it connects to OpenTelemetry, it connects the ecosystems around. More than just be a drop-in replacement solution, it connects all of the other tools that everybody's using in the enterprise. So you can extract the best of the value, of each tool in each part of the world. And well, FluentBet has been 2.1 has been announced today, officially. And from the Calyptia side, the parent company of FluentBet today, where we primarily hire engineers to work in open source, we put our mouth is. We put our money where our mouth is. In Calyptia, we have a product for the enterprise that is called Calyptia Core. Everybody talks about observability, but observability is like a, wide term. But everybody talks about observability platform when you store the data and you analyze the data and how you correlate the data. But few people talks about the problem that happens before that, which is called telemetry pipelines, right? How do you make sure that you can move your data, process the data, and then send this data to a central database? That concept inside observability is called telemetry pipelines, right? And FluentBet is a telemetry pipeline solution. That is like a new name for that, right? Same for FluentD. So one of the problems in the market is like every company, we work with banks, financial institutions, all of them use very expensive SIEMs or vendors, for example, like Splunk. And the problem that they have is these tools are really, really good. But the thing is that they send the whole data to these platforms and they ended up paying money, right, for all the data that they ingest. And the question is, do you query all the data that you're ingesting? Most of the time you're just querying 20%, but you're paying for 100%. So companies get in this struggle, and companies say, okay, if every year we are generating 20 to 30% more data, it means that my bills next year will be 20 to 30% more.
Sure.
Okay, is that worth it? Well, it depends. Most of the companies that we work with, they say, this is too expensive. It's too expensive because we are not extracting the right value. So Calyptia, as a solution, we provide a product called Calyptia Core that is like enterprise platform for telemetry pipelines, where the user can do telemetry pipelines with a drag and drop. They can put the business intelligence into the pipeline, where you can say, please, for every data that's coming that is not relevant or it's a developer message, don't send it to the SIEM because we don't want to pay for that.
Right.
And also we are launching another feature with Calyptia Core in this conference that is called Fleet Management.
Fleet management.
Yeah, one of the things is that we have thousands of FluentBet users, and most of them said, okay, my problem is that I can manage this stuff, but the moment that I have 50,000 nodes, 100,000 nodes, like big corporations, it gets problematic because not all of them run the same configuration.
Yeah.
Most of the time, they're just specific teams or stakeholders that they need special telemetry pipelines configurations or individual business logics. So Calyptia Core, we're launching now with a fleet management capabilities. So more than just create one pipeline to receive and process the data and reduce cost, not also we can attach the agents and do remote telemetry pipelines.
I love it. That's great. How's it been received? I know Observability Day was Monday. You guys were a part of that. You've had a chance to kind of socialize this with the audience here. What are we hearing?
Yeah, I think that everybody's resonating with the message, with the product, because most of people is facing the same problem. And you have the same problem in your inbox, in your email. How many emails are you getting, right?
You don't want to know.
Yeah, so and everybody's moving to microservices, to distributed system, but also, this is really important, most of companies, they're moving to Kubernetes, but they have, I don't know, thousands of VMs, system with Windows, with Linux, but they also have the same problem. How do I move my data? How do I pre-process the data from my Windows boxes before send this out to my SIEM? So Calyptia Core, and with Calyptia we want to simplify all these observability pieces that nobody take care of. Everybody focus on the end of the data, but nobody focus on the telemetry pipelines where we think that there is the real power. Actually, this is what people call it, moving to the left, right?
Shift left.
Shift left, where the data is being generated, try to do analytics on that side. So I think that we're in an early stage from this movement, but happy to have Calyptia, a great team, global team of 30 people working on this problem, and really excited with all our customers.
Absolutely. Eduardo, you know what, we didn't even mention websites. For people who want to get Flow D or Flow Bed, what's the best site? Should they go right to Calyptia, or is there a separate site?
Yeah, if you just want to have the purely open source edition, go to GitHub or fluentbit.io, and you will get the sources, documentation. But for example, if you're a financial institution that cannot use the FluentBit upstream version because we update it every 2 weeks, and you want something for 18 months with just security fixes, you might go to Calyptia and get the Calyptia LTS edition for FluentBit.
I love it. What else are you looking forward to the rest of this week here at KubeCon?
Yeah, I think that KubeCon, for me, this person is very special. This is where the project born, and every feature was built based on feedback from users. So for us, as Calyptia is coming here to engage with our community of users, community of customers, right? But also get all these interactions with feedback about, what are the problems that you are facing today? We just solved the problem from last year. Okay, now tell me about the new problems.
And that's the nature of tech, right? There's always the next problem. There's always the new problem.
Yeah.
As soon as we solve one, sometimes you don't see what's behind that until you solve it, and then the next one presents itself, right? It's sort of like in the book, The Goal, which the Phoenix Project is based on.
Yeah.
Right, as soon as you get rid of one bottleneck, you see the next one downstream. And it's very much, that's just the way of things, isn't it?
Yeah, and for example, some people was asking about AI.
Everyone's asking
AI,
about AI.
Before was,
what's your AI?
Before it was like, can we have blockchain with FluentBit? Yeah. Right. Okay, now it's AI. But AI now makes sense because in the way that we're seeing, for example, how we can take advantage of AI is like in the product, in Calyptia Core, actually we just launched this as a POC. You can have a way to add processing rules. Processing rules, you can specify how the data is going to be modified. You can click on buttons, or you can write a script in our user interface. Now we have a box that you write in human text, what do you want to do with the data, and our AI system generates the script for you.
Crazy. Look, so I am not from the school that says we got to stop AI development.
Yeah.
I don't think anything's going to stop it anyway. I think the kind of thing you just outlined is a perfect example of where AI can rather easily, right, without imagining some sentience or Skynet thing, can really come in and help people right now.
Yeah.
Right, with this type of thing. So you just launched your POC. When do you think it might be a released product, if you will, GA?
Okay, so right now in this KubeCon we release a Calyptia Core 2.0, and this feature we're kind of experimenting. It will be out next week.
Next week.
Yeah, because we have some
Gotta
customers
love
trying it
open
out.
source. That's what it's about,
No,
man.
that is a product.
Yeah.
That's a product. It's private.
Beautiful.
But yeah,
No,
but
no,
people
I get
is getting a ton of value. You know what is the thing? The thing with all this world of Kubernetes and infrastructure, that everybody is working very low level.
Yeah.
Right? But what we need to do is to level up people, right?
Well,
you don't need to think about the agent. You don't need to think about the connection.
So I've seen this before in security as well. People won't do that level up, as you call it, until it's all about, like, the crossing the chasm. right? You have early adopters, early mainstream, late mainstream laggards, right? But the mainstream, which is 70% of the market,
Yeah.
they won't adopt until they see peers of theirs adopting. For most of the mainstream, they don't want to be the first ones,
Yeah.
right? They don't want to be the guinea pig. They don't want to be the experiment. Let the early adopters do that. When they see it working at competitors, at peers, then they do it. And I think that's where we are now in the whole cloud native system. We've got enough early adopters. It's time now where the mainstream is saying, yeah, no, we got to do this. And what's my best way of doing it? And so that confidence builds. So they get out of the weeds, right? And they start coming here now because they take that, they have confidence in this.
Yeah.
Everybody's doing it. They're willing to go beyond. And I think 10,000 people here is proof of that, to tell you the truth.
Yeah.
Right?
No, and that's an interesting perspective. You know what? In the open source, we saw that Fluentbit always got traction, but the moment that AWS said we're going to use it for an infrastructure,
That's it.
AWS, Microsoft, Google Cloud, Alibaba.
That's the stamp that
Yeah.
where it reaches that critical mass and goes mainstream.
Yeah.
Anyway, Eduardo, we're about out of time.
Yeah,
I want to
it was
thank
a pleasure.
you.
Thank you
Always
so much
a pleasure
for
to
being
see
the
you
first
here.
guest.
Don't wait to KubeCon to talk with us. Come talk with us more.
Yeah, anytime.
You can always reach out. We do these by Zoom every day.
Awesome. I'm
All
fully
right.
available. Thank you so much.
Eduardo
Enjoy the
Silva here
conference.
from Calyptia, Fluent D. We're live. We're live with 10,000 people here in Amsterdam. We're going to be right back. Stay tuned. Hey, everyone. We're here. We're live in Amsterdam at KubeCon, where we understand there are 10,000 people, and it seems like every one of them is on that show floor here today. It's buzzing. Really unique thing about the show floor here at the RAI Center is we have I don't know, Austin, what would you call it? It's not a
It feels
dome.
like an airplane hangar.
It's like a giant airplane hangar, and every other panel is wide open. And we're a place right now where we need sunscreen even. It's that sun's
The future's
coming
so bright
down.
you gotta wear shades.
that's it right there. So poor Austin suggested wearing shades. Look, I'm from Florida. We always have glasses with us. So we're here. It's not that we think we're too cool for school. But anyway, let me introduce you to Austin Parker from Lightstep. Hey, Austin,
Hey,
how
how's
are
it
you?
going? Great.
Good, man. It's good to have you here. For those who've watched Techstrong TV or some of our webinars, Lightstep and Austin is no stranger. But for many of you tuning in live for our coverage here at KubeCon, you may not know Austin, you may not know Lightstep. Austin, why don't we start with a little bit about Austin and then go into the Lightstep story?
Yeah, so I'm Austin Parker. I am the head of developer relations at Lightstep, a ServiceNow company. We've been part of the ServiceNow family for a couple of years now,
Yeah.
and Lightstep itself is an observability platform for kind of the modern cloud native enterprise. We bring together your metrics and logs and traces and all that data together, help you understand system performance and understand how your customers are doing, you know?
Yep.
So-
Excellent.
And in my spare time, I'm also a maintainer for the Open Telemetry project, which you may be familiar with if you are familiar with the cloud native observability space.
Very
And
familiar.
that's actually what I'm here to talk about today.
So, someone told me the other recent interview that I did that Open Telemetry is now the second biggest open source project in CNCF. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. It's actually, if you look at all open source projects on GitHub, it's in the top 30, right? That's even including things like Linux, little
Yeah.
projects that you maybe never heard of.
Small ones.
Yeah, small ones. But it's remarkable at how much excitement there is, how many people are involved in the open telemetry community and the observability community, and it's because it's an idea whose time has come.
Yep.
And at Lightstep, that's what we've been hearing as well from our customers. They don't want to be in the world where they're paying someone to come in and lock up all their observability data, right? They want it to be open source. They want to have control of it. And that leads, what we're announcing this week actually at KubeCon is that Lightstep is now the first, as far as I'm aware, the first vendor, the first observability platform to support end-to-end open telemetry with no custom plugins, no proprietary agents, no proprietary code. You can run 100% open telemetry on your side of the firewall. We'll accept open telemetry format data. The data is yours to control. You don't have to install anything other than like one line of config to tell us who you are, right? And we're doing this because that's what our customers ask for, right? Like, and we're hearing this from everyone in the industry, not just cool hip startups, not just kind of hip enterprise companies, but big banks, right? Big enterprise. They're coming and saying, we believe in open source, we believe in open telemetry, this is foundational to where we're going. We need to control our data, right? And that's what we're here to support.
Well, you can't make wine before it's time, Austin, right? And I think one of the things, first we had this whole thing about big data, right? And big data was going to revolutionize things, and I'm talking about Hadoop back then.
Yeah.
Right, and then so the problem was back then was, my goodness, how do we collect all this data? Then it's like the rat moving through the snake. All right, we could collect all this data. How do we store all this data? Then how do we analyze all this data? And now, how do we make actionable intelligence out of all this data? Right, and along the way, you get things like ML and AI acting in there. You get, better storage, better, faster. We couldn't have the open telemetry we have today until those other kind of blocks were laid, those foundations.
Yeah.
But we're at a point now where you get an inflection point, and it takes off.
It takes off, yeah.
And I think that's really what we're seeing right now around open telemetry, around observability. It's real.
Absolutely, and I've said this before about open telemetry, and I think that if you look at the story of the project, we're at the end of the beginning, right?
It's a good way of putting it.
You're at the end of Act 1, and things are going to start changing very soon. The project has gone through a tremendous amount of growth, and we are really pushing very hard to get kind of our core signal stable, right? So metrics, logs, and tracing. And I'm not here to talk about when we're going to release things. It's an open source project after all. Things are kind of done when they're done. But we're pushing very hard towards saying like, okay, we really want to have this stuff done and stable. Open Telemetry this week announced that we are actually converging the Elastic Common Schema for logging with the Open Telemetry Semantic Conventions.
I actually interviewed someone from Elastic on this.
Perfect, yeah.
Yep.
So, and again, this is the goal of the project, right? We want to consolidate, we want to converge, we want there to be fewer standards, we want there to be one well-supported standard for everyone, and if we can achieve that, and that's certainly the direction that we're going, right? We're rapidly moving towards that. Once we kind of hit that point, you're going to see a real big change in how people are kind of approaching monitoring and observability. Because historically, you do get locked into, whatever your provider is because they're the ones that has the instrumentation for you. We believe that by decoupling the instrumentation from the observability, right, saying the instrumentation is yours, the data is yours, then that really makes it more of a question of like, okay, well, how am I as a analysis tool, as an observability platform, how do I make it easy for you to analyze that data, understand that data, and connect that data to sort of customer insights, business analytics, other things like that. That's one of the real core strengths, I think, of Lightstep from ServiceNow is that we're able to work with, honestly, this amazing company that has some of the world's largest companies, helping them do business process automation, helping them understand their IT and customer experience. And we can blend all of this, right? Like, that's where we believe that the future is with kind of observability. It's not just, hey, my API is slow, or hey, I've got some errors over here. It's how am I actually connecting this to customer experience and and those kind of like revenue outcomes, so to speak.
Absolutely. Hey, you mentioned something awesome when we were sitting down.
Yeah.
Lightstep had put some code.
Oh, right, in Open Telemetry. So, Thank you for reminding me. part of this, what we're seeing around people wanting to control their data, people wanting to control their open deployments, is that we can't put people in a situation where they support open telemetry, but it's like it's open telemetry with a star next to it. It's the Sammy Sosa of
An
open telemetry
asterisk, a
support.
little asterisk.
Yeah, you don't want that asterisk,
No.
right? And we're committing to take all of our open telemetry enhancements and upstream them to the project. So if you're not, to explain that, you can think of open telemetry as, this open source project, and a lot of people in this space are building on top of it, right? But maybe they have a proprietary extension or something that, you have a little extra something you got to add in there to make it work with that specific product. What we're committing to do is take all the enhancements and actually push them from Lightstep into OpenTelemetry. So we're donating all of this engineering time and effort. There's a couple of examples of this. We've been working with our friends at F5 to support increased compression for OpenTelemetry data to make it cheaper for companies to send that data out. We've been working with Amazon and several other companies on improving the story for like Lambda and functions as a service observability. We're working with Honeycomb and other companies on improving the configuration and setup experience, right? And I think that's the strength of this project, because you can get people that are competitors working across the aisle to make a better project for everyone. And that's why I'm so excited about the future of OpenTelemetry, and what I really hope is that you see more companies making these sort of pledges as well.
I think we will, because what you just described doesn't apply just to OpenTelemetry. It's this whole it's what I call the foundational era of open source.
Yeah.
And I've been in open source 25, 28 years, 30 years even. Originally it was kind of that Cathedral and the Bazaar. Remember, you read that book?
Yeah.
It was kind of Wild West. And then from there we went to a Big Brother era where a Lightstep would be the manager, if you will, the owner of an open telemetry, and they would run it for their benefit.
Yeah.
It benefited the community, but it was really their benefit, and it was very hard for other vendors to contribute, to be partners, because they weren't on equal footing, right?
Yeah, I think they call that open core these days.
Well, it's still that big, there still is
Yeah.
open source projects that are managed by one vendor.
Yes, absolutely.
But then we did this kind of foundational era where you have the Linux Foundation, and CNCF is part of it, even the Eclipse Foundation, the Apache Foundation, where you have this co-opetition, if we could call it that, right?
I like that.
Right? You have vendors who compete in the market, but we all play on an even playing field, because we know the better we make that foundational playing field, the higher we can all soar in our own, like you just mentioned.
Exactly.
There were ones who are doing this, and the Honeycomb folks do that.
Yeah.
Right? And that's what today's market's about.
Well, and if you think about it, to be a little businessy for a second, what's the total addressable market of observability, if not every single company that runs software? And there are no companies that don't run software.
Yep.
Right? You don't have an enterprise business in 2023 without a lot of software. You don't have a business at all. You don't have, you're not living in the woods, right? Even if you are living in the woods, you probably still need an app to get there.
Yep.
And
or to get your stuff delivered to you.
Exactly, right? Like, you're still getting Amazon. But that's really, I think, the key thing, right? Is like, as an industry, especially a cloud, in the cloud native sphere, or a vendor in the cloud native sphere, I should say. Look at the accomplishments of Kubernetes. I mean, look around us, right? Like
10,000 people here.
10,000 people that are working on projects that primarily don't have a single origin. I know Kubernetes, like people think Kubernetes like, oh, it's a Google thing, but who's the biggest contributor to Kubernetes, right? It's like Red Hat, IBM,
it's these big companies.
Very big companies that aren't named Google. We achieve more as an industry when we work together. And I think that the, KubeCon is a great example of this. OpenTelemetry is a great example of this, because we're not just building, things, cool technologies. We're not just making like really neat demos. we're building the platforms that are really going to power the next 30 to 50 years of software.
I agree.
And to do that and to make that a resilient and reliable and a sustainable way of building these platforms, we have to do it together because we've learned from the past and we've seen like what happens when you don't do that.
Balkanization.
Right.
Linux, Unix, all of that. Hey, Austin, we're almost out of time, but there's another subject I kind of want to touch on.
Sure.
And that is, you mentioned, Lightstep is a ServiceNow company.
Yes.
It's been so for about 2 years. Of course, for those who are not familiar with Lightstep, they had 4 amazing co-founders, Ben Siegelman and, do you remember the
Spoons.
Spoons?
Yeah,
Right,
Spoons, Ben
was
Cronin.
CTI. ServiceNow acquired the company, emerged about 2 years ago. It's taken some time, but you know they've come together. And look, there are some people who say, well, it's now part of this big company. But ServiceNow is a great company to work with. They're very open source friendly. They get the market. Talk to us about Lightstep and ServiceNow working together and what our audience out here can expect.
So I want to, as a shout out, ServiceNow's annual user conference is coming up in a few weeks.
It is.
Yeah.
We'll be there.
You'll be there. All right. Maybe I'll see you around.
Yep, streaming
and we'll,
live.
We'll have some real exciting announcements to make at Knowledge this year. But in a general sense, what ServiceNow sees is the value. If I had to describe what is the point of ServiceNow, what is ServiceNow actually trying to do? They really are trying to make work better for people. They're trying to make this idea of enterprise software something that is achievable and manageable for all of their customers. Because what I have learned from talking to a lot of ServiceNow customers and kind of seeing how they're implemented is that the kind of problems that their customers are facing are very novel, right? Like they are people that kind of sell into that traditional IT center and those traditional IT operations centers. But those, IT managers, those CIOs, are confronted with this reality of, hey, as I go through this cloud transformation, and we're all going through this cloud transformation, suddenly I have all this new stuff, and I don't, it doesn't fit into this model that I have of how to actually understand and quantify performance or measure things. And where Lightstep can really, is really bringing a lot of value to the table is we're giving them a bridge between, cloud native Kubernetes applications and sort of their traditional IT operations management, their incident management, their change management, and we can provide that bridge between old and new that helps them really understand what's going on in the IT estate, be able to still effectively respond to incidents, be able to give sort of their frontline IT or customer support people the data that they need to be able to communicate reliability to their customers, and honestly, so many more things, right? If we're at the end of the beginning of OpenTelemetry, we're still kind of at the beginning of Lightstep plus ServiceNow. And we have some really exciting announcements, later on this year that I'm sure you all will learn about.
In a month or two.
Yeah. And it's really, we are just getting started, and I'm super excited about what's next.
So am I, man. Austin, it's a pleasure to see you here in person.
Great to see you too.
Again, I love doing this with the shades. I feel like
It's
I should
great.
be doing this.
I feel like we need a little umbrella, a little couple
that
peaky
would
drinks.
do it.
It is actually
some more
surprisingly cold
music.
outside.
Yeah, I'm from Florida. It's freezing
Yeah,
outside.
no, I'm.
Hey, we're going to take a break. We're live here at KubeCon in Amsterdam. We'll be back in a moment with our next guest. Hey, everyone. We're back here live at KubeCon, Cloud Native Con. Just waving to one of the 10,000 people walking around out here at this show, which has kind of exceeded expectations. I know it was sold out, and it just... In person is back, right? We've been doing KubeCons for about 5 years now, and I think the biggest one was the one in San Diego right before COVID, but this one is getting close to that, right? It's probably right around there. I want to introduce you to our next guest. His name is Roy.
Yeah.
Roy Ravhoon. I want to make sure I got that right. Roy Ravhoon.
Ravhoon, yeah.
Yep. And Roy is with FinOut. Roy, I feel like, did we meet, maybe was it Yala DevOps, or was there another event where I've seen FinOut?
I think we spoke in Detroit.
Oh, in Detroit.
Yeah.
At KubeCon in Detroit. Yes, that's when it was. Okay. So Roy, I'm going to ask you, if you don't mind, the audience, though we spoke in Detroit, may not be familiar with FinOut and you. Why don't we start with your background?
Sure. So I'm Roy, co-founder and CEO of FinOut. Started my way in the Israeli intelligence units, like most Israeli founders, I guess.
The 8200 pipeline.
8200, exactly.
Uh-huh.
So I spent there like 7 years, something ridiculous like that. And afterwards, I joined a company called Logs.io. I joined them when we were 10 people sitting in an old bridal salon in the port of Tel Aviv, and moved through a couple positions within engineering. The last one I was engineering director, responsible for the entire infrastructure. And there I had to like constantly balance between the SLA and the cost efficiency side of things. So with the SLA, I wanted to spin up more servers to make sure that we're always, over provisioned and we can run. And on my hat as, a cloud financial manager, I had to reduce that and make sure that we're efficient. And that kind of dial and our lack of ability to actually, report cost metrics back was, something that pushed us towards FinOut.
Got it. So, give us. I mean, that was kind of the FinOut story, but let's take it now from that point till today, let's say. Tell us about that journey.
So, startup life is is hectic at best. So we're a little over 2 years old. Raised $18.5 million in 2 rounds till date. 30 employees sitting in Tel Aviv and New York, and building FinOut. We started, the first show that we did ever was KubeCon Valencia. So we showed up like 4 people, didn't know what are we doing, with a very bad booth and a non-working product. And now like a year forward into KubeCons, and I think that the journey has been amazing. Like our maturity as an industry and as a product, I think evolved a lot. Like cost management became one of the hottest topics on the planet at the moment, and we really are pushed by the industry to do lots of very cool stuff and to innovate and to do more support towards Kubernetes, which became the default operating system for everyone, and it starts to be like a major thing that we need to do in support. And I think that journey has been amazing.
Absolutely. All right. One last thing before we jump into news. Website.
It's finout.io. We have all the information that is needed there, like white papers, case studies, solution briefs on whatever it is we're doing, and the ability to just sign up directly on the website, and we can start a POC super quick. It doesn't take any agent, and 5 minutes worth of integration.
Excellent. All right. So now we're here, as I said earlier, 10,000 people at Cloud Native Con, KubeCon. What's news from FinOut here at the show?
So last week we announced the general availability of cost governance suite for Kubernetes. So essentially what FinOut does is we can take costs from multiple different providers. So we support all cloud providers, but also solutions like Datadog and Snowflake and in Databricks and those sorts of stuff, and put it all into one place. And Kubernetes is a very big cost challenge, because the cloud provider is billing you by the instance, but you're actually running pods. So you have like some kind of abstraction layer that you need to translate between the two. So while FinOut always supported that, breaking down that abstraction using commodity tools like Prometheus or Datadog without installing any additional stuff, we now added the ability to add Kubernetes into every other FinOut feature that we have, to have like a full suite of cost management for Kubernetes. This means that we can start to use those, whatever breakdown that we had on Kubernetes in order to allocate costs directly to the teams that have associated with it, the feature, the product line, whatever. We can create budgets and anomalies and do like entire cost governance based on Kubernetes data that can come from all free clouds without worrying that we're missing something or we can get under reporting with the cost. And we also added a feature called Cost Guard, which is our cost governance suite that helps companies reduce costs. And now we added Kubernetes support to it as well. So companies can right-size their Kubernetes deployments and whatever resource they're using, because, Alan, like usually when developers is pushing new stuff to production, they're just over-requesting resources and we will deal with it later, but we never are, right? So CostGuard can scan all of the actual usage of the Kubernetes resources, see what's the actual difference between the requested side and the actual usage side, and we can recommend, like, and put a $sign into each recommendation, like just change that request from 10 gig to 5 gig because you never used those amount of resources, and you can save that amount of money directly in Finland. So it's a great announcement.
Good stuff. What's been, I know it's only kind of the first day of official KubeCon, but they had stuff going on yesterday and so forth. What's been your impression so far?
So I think the venue is amazing and the attendance is outstanding. I mean, the event sold out. I think a month ago, we had a bunch of WhatsApp groups that people are begging for tickets. Yeah. Maybe someone have anything spare or something like that. So it was amazing to see, and it's great to see, an event coming back to the full glory of KubeCon. And there's tons of vendors here, tons of people. Super exciting. Excellent, man.
What else? Anything else to share with the audience?
So, cost management is, I think, on top of everyone's minds, and every CFO and every CEO is actively looking for ways to reduce cost and to allocate it. And especially when running on Kubernetes, we start to see like modern cost challenges that we didn't see before, and like very easily basic reporting of cost and making the organization to adapt into the FinOps state of mind, which means engineers are more responsible for what they're doing and more responsible for their expense. Doing it without a tool that can really help to tie everything together is very, very hard. So FinOps culture is more important than a FinOps tool. But in order to create a good FinOps culture, usually a tool is something that is required. So with FinOut, we can take costs from all different providers. We can give one holistic solution for the entire organization that is catering both DevOps and FinOps and finance personas, all in one platform that we can change the way that they speak directly into unit economics or cost per customer, and those kinds of more advanced capabilities, while still not neglecting the optimization stuff and basic visibility additions. And we're the most competitively priced solution in the market. It's a guarantee, and you also have like a special discount during KubeCon that the folks can claim by coming to our booth and schedule a meeting. So we're here, Startup 25, right down the hall, and so we're excited to talk to everyone.
Excellent, man. Roy, thank you.
Thank you so much, Alan, for having me again.
It's a pleasure seeing you. Don't wait till the next KubeCon to talk to us.
Yeah.
We're live in Amsterdam at KubeCon. We're going to take a break and we'll be right back.
Welcome back to KubeCon, Cloud Native Con Europe. We're here with Andrea Montiu from Canonical, and we're talking about AI and Kubernetes and how all these things are going to come together, because we have MLOps and DevOps, but it's not clear to me where these will ultimately converge. So Andrea?
I'm glad to be here. I'm the AI/ML product manager within Canonical, having a data science background, and I'm quite happy to tell you more about MLOps. I always define it shortly as DevOps for machine learning, and I think your confusion is right, because MLOps in general is quite a new practice. AI/ML in general is new. It has been around for quite some time, but it was not so popular before generative AI and a few other projects that made everyone quite interested, made organizations rethink their strategy and their budgets. You see a lot of reports saying that if you don't start with AI, you might be out of business, which can be scary, right? But it's, I think, a new revolution that comes in place. And what MLOps brings to the table is reliability, repeatability, and portability, such that it connects different dots and different technologies. And what Kubeflow is, because you already mentioned it, it's an MLOps platform. It's an open project that at the moment it's incubating in CNCF since we are here. And in Canonical we have our own distribution, we are working closely, and it's the glue of a bunch of other machine learning tools. So we are integrated with Spark, MLflow, and if you wonder why, because that might be another question, right? I don't think you can do everything within one tool, but you can connect all the dots such that data scientists don't have to struggle anymore with all the drivers, compatibilities, how do you move it from here to there? How do you run it at scale if you just experiment it? How do you monitor it? So you have one platform that has it all for you, but also because it's integrated with a bunch of other tools.
I feel like a lot of organizations are hiring data scientists who wind up doing a lot of plumbing. So can we kind of take away a lot of that lifting and make it a little more seamless for them and actually have them, I don't know, work on data science?
The truth is that at the moment, there is a huge skill gap on the market with data science. And also, the data scientists that are hired, often they spend way more time on a lot of other things, not on writing code and building machine learning models or data science models. They need to spend a lot of time at the data side, cleaning it, preprocessing it, finding where the data sources are, because organizations didn't have a huge focus on data until a couple of years ago. And then once they have something or a model that they're happy with, they struggle understanding how to run it at scale, because there is need for more compute power, there is need to monitor it, there is need for serving. And if there is not a reliable way to do it, it's very complicated. So shortly, yes, MLOps actually makes lives of data scientists, machine learning engineers, a lot seamless and a lot more collaborative, because at the moment there is quite a big trend in the industry to have data scientists working in silos. So you have 2 data scientists in marketing, they do data science for marketing, and then you have 3 others for sales operations, and they do it for that, but they don't collaborate, even if they use the same data sets. And there are a lot of things that could be done jointly. For example, cleaning the data, you do it once and then you enjoy it. But now they do it twice, and it's a lot of waste of time at the end of the day, which often falls as AI does not bring enough return on investment. But it's not because of data scientists, but rather because there is a lot of manual work that could be automated at the end of the day.
Is there some duplication of effort, because the data scientist is creating an artifact, and a lot of times they're storing it in something that feels like a feature store, or what they call a feature store, and yet we have all these Git repositories, so does that need to converge?
Well, they have different roles, right? But you capture it correctly, because all those, at the end of the day, machine learning models are deployed using Python code. That's the truth. They write Python code that runs into Jupyter notebooks initially, but if they don't put it in a place that can be visible for everyone else, such as Git repositories, it's almost impossible to know what you're working on, for example. So you're right here, and then there are different types of stores that need to be developed. Feature stores for understanding which are the relevant features for different data sets. Model store as well, because you don't do machine learning once, you develop a model and you never look at it again. You do it constantly and repeatedly, and some of the models might have use cases in various areas of the business, because they might have the same needs. If we think of automations, for example, they can easily be replicated based on models that have been developed by other teams.
Are the models being built primarily in the cloud, or are we seeing a lot of people doing stuff on premise these days because the data is kind of sensitive? Where are we building these models?
I think you're touching on a very interesting topic now, because our keynote at KubeCon is really about secure MLOps on the public cloud and how you can use highly sensitive data on the public cloud with confidential computing. But going back to your topic on where do we develop AI/ML models, I think it's everywhere. often enterprises start experimenting on the public cloud. So they use AWS, they use Azure, they use Google, but there are topics or projects that they would like to do on-prem or they would like to scale on-prem due to usually pricing constraints. And this is where also MLOps is important, because how do you do that transition from the public cloud to the private cloud? Or how do you enable actually hybrid cloud scenarios? Because you might have part of the data on the public cloud, part of it on the private cloud, and you don't want to move it because it's very expensive. So this is where MLOps comes in place, ensuring and offering hybrid cloud scenarios or multi-cloud scenarios to be doable for data scientists.
Everybody and his brother is talking about large language models and generative AI. The ones that we see are built by Microsoft, and they're massive and they required years to build, but are we going to see smaller large language models that people are going to build for more narrow use cases, and is this going to become commonplace?
I think what ChatGPT did, and is great, is to bring AI in front of everyone and showcase that, hey, it's here, it's ready to be used, and it's easy to be used. It's not this unicorn out there that no one can touch unless they're extremely technical. And I think this is great because this is what gave a lot of confidence to people, to professionals, but also to organizations to try it out. But to go back to your question, if you go a bit behind, you'll see a bunch of AI startups doing LLM, having use cases with LLM models, actually, which are much smaller. And I think it's a trend that is going to evolve quite quickly from now on. ChatGPT opened a box that is going to solve a lot of problems in a bunch of industries, and of course it takes time to develop them, but it is going to happen.
We see a lot of people building AI models on top of Kubernetes. What's that one thing you see people doing that maybe is a mistake, or something that you wish they knew before they got started so that they wouldn't run into some type of issue? I mean, what's your best advice to folks?
Well, when it comes to machine learning, I think people often get scared. I got scared when I started with AI. It was 10 years ago. I was doing my thesis, and I was very confused on, is it safe? Can I do it? But the most important thing that anyone can do is to understand a problem that they want to solve, right? And once you have the problem clear in your mind, you want to generate sound that sounds better, I don't know, it's just an example, then you know what you're trying to solve, and the next step is to ensure that you have enough data to train models. There is no machine learning project without data, even if we want to do it, but it's not. And these are the two most important things for me. Have a problem and have data. The next step is, of course, to try to build it reliably. Don't try to work in your own silo, because at some point it's going to be overwhelming. I think a lot of data scientists struggle with that. At the end of the day, there are often engineers who shifted or statisticians who shifted. And in both of these areas of work, we are used to work by ourselves. So try to collaborate and try to find joint efforts. Last but not least, always bear in mind that the end audience of your machine learning model is not an engineer. It's very often business people who don't have any technical background. And how do you showcase your work in front of them can be your success or your failure. If you're doing something that can be shown through dashboards, tell a story through those dashboards such that they can understand the problem quite quickly, they can understand what are the outliers, and also they could easily see trends, for example, so it's easy for them. You don't need to spend more than 30 seconds on a dashboard to understand it. If you want to dig deeper, yes, you should have the tools to do it, but if you just want to get a glance, I think that should be easy. And I think that's where data scientists still have to learn on how do you tell a story from your work? How do you put it in front of people who benefit out of it?
All right, folks. If you're scared of AI, take comfort in the fact that you're not alone. Hey, Andrea, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you very much for having me.
All right, folks, we'll be back in a couple of minutes. Hello, and welcome back to KubeCon plus Cloud Native Con Europe. I'm Mike Vizard. We're with Amit Govrin, who's with Kubia AI, and we're talking about how AI will be applied to DevOps. Amit, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Everybody and his brother's talking about ChatGPT, but you guys have been ahead of this game for a little while. You've been putting conversational AI in front of DevOps platforms, and now you're figuring out how to help people build workflows. How automated can automated get?
I'll tell you the true answer. It's not about the automation aspect of it. It's a human in the loop element of it that actually is what extends most of these processes and makes them a lot more cumbersome than typically a machine to machine. It's very easy to go and to automate some with APIs. It's a whole different process if you actually have to go and get human feedback, get people to approval flows, get them to do sub-transactions that may not be part of that workflow. And that's actually where a lot of the operations extend themselves and get in queues and so forth. So this is really a way to consolidate much of that.
A lot of people are always suspicious of things that are magic and things they don't understand. So walk us through how this actually works, because that will demystify it for people and they'll be less afraid of it.
So ChatGPT for DevOps is really more of writing the buzzwords, but let's actually consolidate what that actually means. There's two sides of the coin that we're solving for. The first one, as you correctly mentioned, is a conversational AI for the end user experience. You know, when we launched last year, we talked about ourselves as Siri for DevOps because that was pre-ChatGPT. People didn't really know how to contribute or attribute conversational AI to operations. So we said, look, think about it as a way to prompt using natural language, having the end users really be able to consume operational workflows, DevOps functions. So think about knowledge management. How do I do this and let's go one step back. Think about the concept of data catalogs. Okay, you have Notion, Confluence, your technical docs. People come and prompt the on-call engineer. How do you roll back a Kubernetes environment? How do you provision a new cluster and so forth? These are things that typically will require a human in the loop, an operator to go into help provision. Or he'll throw you at a few sets of docs, go and read it for yourself. Think about the large language models now training on the customer data, okay? Using a vector database, it's all their own namespace, so it's all secure. And now we're using structured and unstructured data to embed that into human conversations. So now you can go and ask the machine, how do you do X, Y, Z? It will go and not just throw the links at you, but also the precise answer with actionable prompts into it. So that's the end user experience, the ability to go and to interact with the machine as if you're talking to a human on the other side. That's one side.
So it doesn't sound like AI is going to eliminate the need for DevOps engineers per se, as much as it may give them or augment them.
100%, and I think everybody has to think about AI in this respect. It's not here to replace you, it's here to empower you. And that's actually where the empowerment on the other side of the coin exists. When we're talking more on the operator side, the platform engineers, DevOps, SRE teams, people who are in charge with really standing up on an internal platform to serve their customer, their organization needs, and to maintain those. So that's workflow creation, that's data management, that's all the various, it's a lot of work, a lot of heavy lift. Oftentimes if you're having to replace a system, this could be a project, and that factors into a lot of buying decisions, by the way, for some of these organizations. So what we've done, and this is what we're now announcing at KubeCon, is allowing generative AI for workflow creation and automation. The ability to essentially prompt using natural language. The system will build out with all the business logic, attribute access controls, all the various components that the operator would necessarily have to have, and build it out in low code and allow you to fine tune that workflow and then commit that, debug it and commit it to your organization. So things that would take otherwise hours would take now minutes to do.
As we kind of sort that through, if I go into an organization, I might see hundreds of developers and maybe 4 software engineers on the DevOps side.
Sure.
So are we changing the math so that those 4 people can actually support 100 DevOps developers type folks? Or because DevOps in some places is a bottleneck, so is the bottleneck going to go away?
That's the idea, especially in today's economic climate. People may not have the privilege of hiring more headcount in order to support the organizational needs, but the organizational needs are not going away. And this is a way to really augment that and really help get a lot more, I don't want to say 10x productivity, we've seen that happen before, but have a lot more productivity out of the existing headcount. And also think about this for budgetary reasons. We're also helping optimize licenses, seats of different SaaS providers. We're helping people enact budget controls within their infrastructure provisioning very easily, say within Slack or Teams. So that's also a way to really rein in on some of the economic factors while also optimizing the efficiency of your organization.
So what's next? What should people expect? We have conversational, we have the workflow is created, so where do we go from here?
Do you mind if I give you more of a statement? I think one of the reasons why large language models has been the iPhone moment, and people are getting infatuated with the magic of how it looks like and how easy it is to create very nice demos. But at the end of the day, what it actually did for us, it changed the way humans and machines interact with one another. Okay, it's a conversation. Up until now, humans needed to be, apt enough to code or low code with all the business logic to interact with the machine so it understands. Now, for the first time, machines can speak human language and convert that into code. So that changed the dynamic of how people interact. So think about this as the gateway to the next level of how do you interact with the machine as if it's a human operator, and really help streamline a lot of operational knowledge and data silos that exist in humans that may leave the organization and leave the organization exposed or otherwise inefficient. This is a way to really maintain your tribal knowledge within the organization in-house and to have a continuity plan for the organization that also scales with its size. So,
how smart will all this get? Am I going to be able to go into the office one day and just verbally talk to the machine and say, tell me the 3 things that might get me fired today, and then it'll come back with these are the 3 things you should be working on?
We're not an HR bot, so I wouldn't be able to tell you that. It's actually very controlled and reined in and politically correct and so forth. It's very fun interaction, by the way. It can tell you jokes. You know, one of my favorite jokes, it tells you, where can I take my date tonight? It will say the Kubernetes Club. So there's all sorts of fun prompts that you can have, and it tells jokes, but at the end of the day, it's conversational. It's supposed to be non-threatening. It's supposed to be easy to use, as if you're having a chat with Jason or Bob or Frank on the other side, only that here it's available 24/7, doesn't take time off. So it really gives you that kind of end-to-end day-to-day experience.
We've seen the emergence of prompt engineers as a job. Is that a skill for real, or am I just going to have natural language? What is a prompt engineer going to do?
Well, prompt engineering is how do you interact with the machine to get your intents across in an optimal manner. You need to know what it is you're looking to prompt, but the machine, the more specific you give, the fine-tuning, if you may, you give it, the more precise of an answer it will give. And that's precisely how the new methodology. Today, prompt engineering is going to replace, citizen development and coding, if you may. So up until now, it may have been low code. You can go and express yourself relatively easy with drag and drop. You still have to know the business logic behind it in order to prompt low code. Here, it's a way to use your words in order to prompt it.
All right. So what's your best advice to folks as we start this brave new world of AI that we're looking at? What should they do to get started?
It is a brave new world, right? So embrace change and embrace AI. If I can give you the best comparison I can give, it's first industrial revolution. The Ford Motor Company, the first smart assembly lines. So initially it was humans manning every single point of it, screwing every single bolt. The first factories were getting dozens at most per month, of inventory out the door. Then the smart assembly lines came on board, and the humans became operators of machinery and could get a lot more done. It didn't replace humans. All it did is allow the humans to be more domain focused into what they're doing and optimize their work. And I think that's very much how we should look at AI. It's supposed to help echo our best attributes. And as long as you can find yourself within that realm and know how to reinvent yourself a bit in terms of your day-to-day, you can be that much more valuable to your organization.
All right. Folks, wise man once said, the future's here, it's just unevenly distributed. Time to get started. Amit, thanks for being on the show. Thanks for coming by.
Thank you, my friend.
All right. Hello, and welcome back to KubeCon plus Cloud Native Con Europe. I'm Mike Vizard, and we're with Jay Tehima, and we're talking about how to get started in the community in general. Jay is with IINZ, and they're doing some work with a lot of the people who live in New Zealand about how to actually become part of the open source community, and he's going to share some tips. Jay, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Good to be here.
I think a lot of people kind of want to participate in open source, but they just don't know how to get started. They don't know where to begin. So what have you seen as you kind of bring people into the community? What works and how do they get started?
Yeah, no, you're right. It's definitely a learning curve for those who aren't familiar. From my experience in New Zealand, most people never even heard of open source. So it was backtracking a bit to even help people understand what it was and try and provide some examples and metaphors and things that people could actually, develop a frame of reference from. So that came with a lot of good learning as well. But I think part of the things that I've found is to be effective is one, provide some examples in terms of where it's used and how ubiquitous it actually is, more than what people might realize. And a lot of development opportunities and career pathways and things as well. But a lot of open source is about community. And I think that's probably been one of the most powerful sort of ways to help people understand what that looks like, being able to show up and serve and see where they can provide value whatever that might look like. So whether it just be attending meetings or good first issues and pull requests and all those sorts of things, which, like I said, is new territory for a lot of people. I think that's gone a long way just to help create little footholds to help people step into it. So. Yeah.
Do I need an invitation to attend the meeting, or is it like going down to my local open source pub and I just see who's there and hanging out?
A little bit, yeah. There's just show up. I mean, meetings are often advertised in the Slack channels. Obviously, CNCF Slack channel we frequent quite a lot. We're also part of the mentoring working group under the TAG contributor strategy. So it's always, we always appreciate new people with different perspectives who want to come in and learn a little bit more about what we do and ask questions and see how they might be able to get involved. So yeah, it's really easy.
There's a lot more organizations that are consuming open source than there are contributing to it. Is there a process for which companies or people who work for companies can contribute to open source projects in a way that they're not today, or do we need more of them to participate and make it more of maybe an official function versus something just an individual does as a hobby?
That's a good question. To be honest, that's something I'm still learning about myself. I don't have a huge tech background, and to be honest, more of my focus has been at the community education level. I think there's a lot that can happen to developing the message and how we sort of communicate that value for potential contributors. And from there, we sort of look at how more businesses and things might be able to utilize that. I've talked to some people in the tech sector back home with some of their experience about how they've done that, and they've had it with mixed results. A lot of businesses tend to lean more towards the closed source stuff. It's familiar, it works to meet whatever sort of primary objectives they think they have at the moment, and perhaps the real value of a lot of open source software hasn't really been fully realized yet. So for me, I think there's, as I said, a lot can be done more at the people level first, and I think that's where more of the industry level stuff will come in time.
I think a lot of people think that contributing means writing code, but there's other ways to contribute. You could A, send money, or B, you can help with documentation. There's other stuff to be done that I think organizations aren't thinking through.
Yeah, absolutely. It's I think that's a huge misperception. And like I said, it was reassuring for me. Like I said, I don't have a tech background. I can't code to save myself. So I definitely came into the game a little bit unsure in terms of how I can help out at all. But as you said, being able to even make minor tweaks to documentation is huge. I think my first PR was about how to set up a GitHub account, or that you need to set up a GitHub account to register on the Kubernetes website. So it's little things like that perhaps might often get overlooked, and it might be like little changes to like grammar checks and things in documentation. So I think people might sort of underestimate and undervalue how those little tweaks can actually make a big difference, because ultimately it helps more people to understand what it looks like and how they can get involved in the future as well. Attending meetings, we host meetups, help with marketing, developing learning resources and collateral and things as well. So yeah, any of that can be just as valuable as anything that you might do with more technical experience.
What role does the CNCF play in helping support folks like you? What do they provide? What's that kind of experience? Because other folks may want to do what you do.
Well, CNCF's been huge, and first and foremost, just helping me to feel welcome in the space, and as I said, feel like I can do something. We've, like I said, as part of the mentoring working group, we help create pathways for people to get involved in things like the LFX mentorship, which we've just got one of our first students in New Zealand involved in, which has been huge. But a lot of things around sort of technical guidance and strategic experience and things like how do we help bridge that gap for people to get from A to B, who are curious about it and, like I said, really unsure how to do so. So like I said, they help fund a lot of the events and even provide some free certification and training for people to get upskilled in that space. So all that's been really beneficial as well.
What do you know now that you've been doing this for a little while that you wish you knew when you first started?
Great question. It's going to take some time to learn and not to be overwhelmed. I was really privileged to work around some really supportive but super experienced and knowledgeable teammates who, when you start listening to what it is they do and how they do that, it can be pretty overwhelming from the outset. But I think if I'd say anything to myself back then is to not let that overwhelm you, and like I said, just show up and listen and see where you might be able to help out, and a lot of things will tend to fall in place if you continue to show up. It's I think there's a saying in the open source community about chop wood and carry water. Be prepared to perhaps do that grunt work and be present and bring the best of yourself, and a lot of things will open up from that. So I think understanding that early on is really good, and not to let all the technical stuff sort of weigh you down and distract you.
One of the things that you're doing that's unique is you're working with a lot of the indigenous people. Is open source an opportunity to kind of bring tech to more people and make tech more accessible in general, and that can be applied elsewhere?
Absolutely. So as part of my work with Toi Karawa, it's a Māori Economic Development Agency. We've got a program working with about 30 Māori schools across the region, looking at ways to improve educational development and things like that. And I see open source as a huge way in to do that. Typically they're they work with like Google and Microsoft and Apple ecosystems, which is great. But I think Linux, for instance, offers a huge alternative and other options that otherwise they're not aware of. They're already doing utilizing some open source teaching platforms, LMSs and things like that. But I think the potential there is a lot bigger, and we're starting to connect with some Māori companies now who work in open source. There's some huge things there around data sovereignty and things as well, which offers another sort of look into it and how people can get involved and contribute to that. So yeah, I'm really excited by those prospects too.
All right, folks, you heard it here. Take a look at Jay. If he can do it, so can you, because anybody can, right?
100%.
All right, thanks for coming by.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
All right, guys, we'll be back in a minute.
Hey, everyone. We're back here live. Our continuing coverage of KubeCon here in Amsterdam. We have 10,000 people in attendance at this KubeCon.
Crazy.
Which is crazy, is right. Sold out, amazing event. I hope you've been enjoying our coverage all morning with Mike Vizard, our Chief Content Officer, and myself. I'm Alan Schimmel. Our next guest, you know what? I see him only at conferences. He never comes to visit. Sound like a Jewish mother here. You never call. But he's my friend Liam Heimovich. Excuse me. He's the CEO founder of Rookout, right?
Yeah.
So I did it. Say your name correctly for us.
Liran Heimovich.
There we go. So Liran, I want to jump into, as you call it, the fourth pillar of observability. But before we do, just in case there are some people out here who don't know from Rookout, they don't know who Rookout is, why don't you give them a little bit of a flavor?
Rookout is all about bringing observability to developers. We think that observability started as a branch of monitoring, which was very IT and ops focused. And today, the modern nature of observability is still very operations focused. Today, it's SREs and not IT administrators, but still they are asking different questions and they have different needs than the average developers. And we think that as part of the shift left, as part of the fact that we want developers to truly focus on production, own the customer experience, they need their own set of tools that are tailored for their needs to see what's going on in production. So that's what Rookout is about, building that platform.
Absolutely. And Rookout is, look, I think I remember when you first came out, it was about 4 or 5 years?
Yeah.
So, and these are your people, this is your crowd, right? Here at the Cloud Native world. Now, probably one of the, we announced this morning, Laurent, that what used to be Container Journal, we've renamed now Cloud Native now.
Congratulations.
Thank you. But part of the reason, look, when I first started Container Journal, I almost named it Docker something. I'm glad I didn't. But even the word containers, the Cloud Native movement has kind of outgrown just containers or even just Kubernetes. And hence Cloud Native now. One of the biggest things is observability, right, in the Cloud Native universe. And, you have some unique, they're not unique, but some well thought out ideas around observability. As I mentioned earlier, we're going to talk about the fourth sort of pillar. But before we start the fourth, you should tell us what the first three are.
So I think most of the audience is familiar with them, but the first, let's start with the first before we go. The first is logging. I mean, logging has been with us for decades, maybe even a century by now. Every Hello World application anybody has ever wrote is a form of logging, and that's what we all started with. And then later on, we learned that logging don't scale all that well. And we started with metrics, which were popularized by Google as part of the SRE handbooks, and got them to build a planet scale software for the first time. And after that, we also had Spans, which helps with cloud native and microservices and all that distributed tracing sort of things. But both metrics and tracing are a zoom out approach. It's about how do I get logs and look at them over time, over space, how do I look at logs between microservices, how do I get the big picture, and so on, which are exactly the questions SREs are asking, the questions SREs should be asking. But most developers don't spend most of their time zooming out, they spend most of their time zooming in on specific bugs, zooming in on specific functions they have to make more efficient or refactor, zooming in on features they need to add or remove. And for that zoom in mechanism, we didn't used to have a good solution for the past many years now.
Absolutely. Okay, so now let's get to this fourth pillar, if you will, and what is Rookout doing with it?
So if you think about, look at those dumb log lines, just I got here. Well, that's the most common logline engineers ever write, especially when they're debugging. When engineers use logline to understand the state of the application, where did we go to? What are the variable values? How did we get here? And so on and so forth. But the thing is, for logs, you have to be very prescriptive. Everything you want in the log, you have to write. You want a specific variable, you have to write it. You want a dictionary, you have to write it. You have to think about how do I stringify it? How do I manage the size? How do I make sure I not lose data on the one hand? But how do I make sure the logline itself is not causing harm? It's not too expensive to write, in performance, in CPU, it's not creating unnecessary input or output, and so on and so forth. And it's really a hard balance to strike, and which is why most log lines end up being very lackluster and not very valuable. What most engineers would really want is just saying, tell me what happened here. And that's what a snapshot is all about. Tell me what happened here in this line, get me all the variable values, get me the entire stack trace, get me the version of the source code, get me everything that happened. And that's what snapshots are about. Now, if you think back to it, we had this in one form or another for a few decades now. Especially, you had Linux had core dumps. When a process crashed, Linux would give you a core dump, which is exactly that, the state of the application in its last second of life. but snapshots is about bringing that to the cloud native world, to the distributed world. It's about making that scalable and easily usable.
Excellent. Sorry, just so you know, Laurent, they don't see me because they only see this background. They don't realize we're sitting here in this like an airplane hangar with the sun coming down on us, with 10,000 people
Walking by.
Across from us is the rancher by Seuss, and they're kicking soccer balls on the target.
It's a conference, it's fun.
It's a lot of fun. It's good to be back at a conference like
Yeah.
this. So, if I'm not mistaken, the last time you and I spoke was Detroit.
I think we spoke in Yala DevOps.
Yala DevOps, so it was about last September.
Yeah.
Yeah, 9 months ago. We spoke a little about snapshots then.
Spoke a little bit about shift left versus shift right, and kind of how we want engineers to not just shift left is not so much about bringing the real world into the lab as it is about bringing developers out into the real world, because there is only so much you can get into the lab. And I think one of the key aspects we've learned at Rookout over the past 9 months is that we've always considered the key value proposition of Rookout, the agility, the fact that we can get you anything, anytime, and you don't have to pre-specify it. And over those 9 months, we've learned it's not just about the agility, it's also about the format we bring the data, it's about the verbosity of the data. And we found that many of our customers and users don't care so much about the agility as they do about the fidelity and the fullness of the data. And even if we work on the same data in a very static approach, it would provide just as much, if not more value for some of their use cases. And so while we're still big believers and big proponents in being able to determine in real time what you want and get it just like that, we've also learned that there is a huge value in snapshots, in the fact that you can get an entire picture. And I like the quote that, just like a picture is worth 1,000 words, a snapshot is worth 1,000 log lines, because it's going to take us that much effort to accurately describe the state of the application using traditional logging.
So, look, since then, today, you can't talk more than 10 minutes without AI. Generative AI, not generative AI. What do you think AI's role here might be?
So I think AI is going to make a huge impact. I think everybody's talking about ChatGPT and general purpose AI. I think we're seeing more and more efforts to integrate AI with domain specific data. I mean, it's not just about having AI being able to read code, it's about having AI being able to read code well, seeing architecture correlate the source code itself, the static source code, with dynamic observability data, kind of making those deductions automatically, or at least pointing people in the right direction. I think there's going to be a huge boon for that. And I think that once you put in AI into the mix, and by the way, we're also working on automations, then the fact that you can dynamically decide what to collect becomes even more valuable. Think about it, you have some AI somewhere that's getting fed both with your source code, your observability data, and it can shift. It can shift your observability data in real time, on the fly, without writing code, without redeploying. And that's a key element of what we're focusing on, being able to allow AI or other more traditional approaches to automating observability using our dynamic instrumentation capabilities.
I love it. Last question. We're hearing about hard times in tech, layoffs, budgets being cut. I'd say looking around at the floor here, I don't see it. Wondering what your impressions are.
The truth has two sides. I mean, on one hand, people, there's, as far as I know, in most countries, in most roles in the tech, there is still more open positions than the people who are looking for a job.
Yeah.
It's a bit harder to look for a job. It takes a bit longer. Employers can be more picky, but still there are plenty of open positions open. And yet, no, people are working harder. People are more worried about their jobs. Salaries are not going up every 2 months like they used to. And especially when it comes to new expenses, new hiring, new vendors, companies are more deliberate. And I know that working with our customer base, many of them have found that logs are a huge expense. And in fact, most of the expense around logs is FOMO driven, it's around fear. 99% of the logs are never looked at.
Never at all.
It's a huge expense.
Sure.
And it's all about being unable to collect real data when you need it. And we're seeing more and more customers prefer to take a more dynamic approach to observability rather than trying to collect everything, hoard everything. It costs a fortune. Most companies prefer not to pay that today. And just keep what you must. Keep some of what you must maybe in cold storage and not hot storage, and rely much more on dynamic approaches to observability to get what you need when you need it.
Excellent. You know what I forgot? For people who want to get more information on Rookout, Leo, where do they go?
So feel free to reach out to us at rookout.com. And if you happen to be at KubeCon itself, we have a booth right here. We'll be happy to host you and show you a quick demo.
Excellent. All right, we are live in Amsterdam, in the sun. Hopefully that'll pass. I
love the sun.
You love
in
this.
every conference there's a huge black or white cover.
This is true.
You're going in, you can spend 2 days in the conference without seeing the sun. No, the sun is right there.
Here comes the sun.
Much livelier.
All right, be well, Lior. We'll be right back with our next, Laron, we'll be back with our next guest. Hey everyone, it's me, Alan Schimmel from Techstrong, back here live in KubeCon. Kind of at the beach, it's really sunny here. So I'm going with my sunglasses so I don't squint. I took the sun seat. My friend Or Weiss here, I gave him a seat in the shade. He's got it made in the shade.
You took one for the team.
I took one for the team like I'm supposed to. Or welcome, how are you?
I'm great, it's good to be here. KubeCon is lively and with some awesome people.
It's buzzing with 10,000 people here, so
yeah,
it's crazy.
Yeah.
So Or, you know what? We should start off with, this is Or Weiss. He's from a company called Permit.
Permit.io, that's right.
Why don't you give him a little bit of the Or and Permit story?
Yeah, so Permit is really about building permissions into your product. If you ever use software, you probably noticed that in every software you need to decide who can do what. And you need these interfaces that control how people and system connect to what you've built. So not along if you ever seen or used any of these. User management with the ability to assign roles, API key management, secrets management, audit logs, approval flows, emergency access, invites, and this list just goes on and on. It's something that you have to have in every piece of software, but you really shouldn't be building it yourself. Just like you don't build authentication, just so you don't build encryption on your own, it's dangerous to build authorization on your own. So we provide it ready off the shelf, you embed it into your software, and it comes with easy to use interfaces that even a monkey can use, or even say a product manager if they're smart enough. It generates policy for you.
Okay.
By the way, product managers are the ones that love their joke the most, ironically. So Permit generates policies for you as policy as code, pushes into a Git repository, but makes it all as right and easy to use interfaces as part of your system. So you can focus on your core features.
Absolutely. And again, it's Permit.io. Okay. Or we got that out of the way. What's new? What's new with Permit? What's new with the market that you see?
So actually I want to talk about the market. What we're seeing is just like as authentication got standardized and had other players coming into the space and having the space mature, we're seeing this happening now very quickly with authorization. So we already have companies like us, like Permit, kind of leading the charge, but we're seeing other companies, the cloud vendors, Microsoft and AWS coming in with their own policy languages and their own ways to try and standardize the space. And that's something that I'm very excited about, because it's not just about having a specific solution or a specific implementation. It's how we as a whole community, how we decide how we manage access and how we build secure applications together. And the other players kind of recognizing this, recognizing what we're building and chiming in is something that I think is very exciting. It's going to dramatically accelerate the space. One maybe key point to mention is what AWS is doing. So they're launching a new service called AVP, Amazon Verified Permissions, that comes with its own policy language called Cedar. which is kind of like OPA, like Rego and Open Policy
Yes.
Agent. So they're coming out with their own language. And here at Permit, we're already looking at that and how we, just like we support OPA and support other policy languages, we're language agnostic and we want to work with those new languages. And this new polyglot but standardized ecosystem that is emerging, I find it very, very exciting.
Very cool. The thing sometimes with AWS is they'll introduce something like this, and some people will say, well, I don't need a standalone solution. And I'm not banging AWS at all here, but generally their solutions, they're not as full featured as as a standalone, let's say.
They're very hard to consume more often than not.
They are.
So that's why I'm more excited, not about the specific solution here, but the maturity of the ecosystem. The recognition that everyone needs a solution like this and we should have different building blocks that we can consume together and agree on in a standardized fashion. So one of the key things that we bring with Permit, as I mentioned, these interfaces, these policy as code interfaces that generate code for you. So those will allow you to consume services like AWS's or any other solution in the space without having to go deep into the reads. So this is the standards being formed, being adopted, and solutions like ours help everyone to consume them and build them into their software. And the end result is better software, more secure software, more easily consumable software for everyone.
Absolutely. You mentioned this whole standards thing. And I think that is kind of tied into like the core of what CNCF and Linux Foundation and the whole open source movement is when you could build a common framework, a common standards,
right,
a common way of communicating, of interacting. It allows companies like a Permit to come in on top of that, excuse me, and maybe not worry about the foundational plumbing, if you will, but build on higher functionality.
So you're spot on. So with Permit, we had to build some of the infrastructure components on our own because they didn't exist. But we would have much better preferred if the ecosystem was more mature and you can just latch on into existing plugins within systems. But seeing as those are still maturing, we decided to expedite that growth by creating open source ourselves. So we created an open source project called OPAL, Open Policy Administration Layer, which is, at this point, it's kind of the de facto way to use OPA, to use Open Policy Agent in scale. So OPAL loads the policy directly from Git and the data that you need from wherever you have it directly into your policy agents in real time. And that's also the connecting block that we have with the other services, with what AWS is building, with what other players and other cloud vendors are building as well. And it's how we can seamlessly connect with other players and also how we create part of the standards that help this space accelerate. So I'm really excited about what the CNCF is leading and how we participate in that by the adoption of OPA and other policy engines and other solutions that exist in the space.
I love it.
Yeah.
What else do you think as we sit here with 10,000 people around us?
I think first of all, it's great to see KubeCon coming back to its glory days.
Yeah.
I can think of pre-pandemic times where we had conferences like this, and the previous ones were a bit of a letdown, I have to say, but seeing how people here running around, interacting with all of these companies, and having this amount of people again, it kind of gives me hope that we can regain those glory days that we had in the past. And I'm also very excited about interacting with all these people. I'm excited about the questions being asked. I'm excited to see that little sparkle in developers' eyes as they're talking about embedding what we're building and what other vendors are bringing here into their software. And it's heartwarming to see.
Cool. Or thank you for coming in and stopping in. Always, my friend. OrWisePermit.io. Check it out. We're live here. We'll take a break. We'll be back. Hopefully this sun passes over. Bye-bye. Hey, everyone. We're back here live on the floor of KubeCon, along with 10,000 other people. It's quite a show here in Amsterdam. Amsterdam is really shining. We've had the luxury of spending a few days here and seeing some of the sights, exploring the city, eating the food, sampling everything else they have to sample. My next guest is Michael Cade. Michael's with Castin by Veeam. If you watch Techstrong TV often, you've seen Michael before, but we've never, it's different when you're live,
sure.
Right? Once you go live, it's a whole different story. Michael, welcome. What do you think of this show so far?
Yeah, it's awesome. Like, obviously, I think years gone by, KubeCon. Obviously, let's forget about the pandemic. We don't need to talk about that anymore. But I think years gone by, it was very developer focused. I think developers were getting sucked into this new platform, this new ecosystem. Now the conversations that I'm having, at least, are 80% SREs,
really?
Platform engineering. Whatever new name, new title that you want to stick to.
It's ops. It's ops.
But it's definitely the people that have that data responsibility, that they're putting storage, they're putting different applications, they're keeping the lights on. It's the day two operations is what I'm seeing. So that's
a
the
very
trend
interesting
so
take,
far.
Michael, because I've been sitting here all morning talking with people, and some of them are saying, look, we're asking developers to do something different. We're not necessarily shifting left, though we are, but we're actually pulling the developers right.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And I think, like, if you look back to DevOps, my argument around DevOps is that we pulled the operations to the left, right? And now we're pulling potentially the DevOps to have a bit more of an understanding about what the infrastructure or what the platform looks like with their application as well. So again, trying to meet in the middle, but it's like a shift.
But it's kind of like that tug of war where the middle could maybe move. And you mentioned it when we were talking off camera. Look, and on camera, a lot more conversations with SREs, a lot more conversations with platform engineers.
Yeah.
In my day, we called those people ops.
Yes, it's systems administrators, right?
Yeah.
But why be called a systems administrator in 2023 when you can
be a platform engineer?
When you can get 20% more salary for being a
well,
platform
that
engineer.
is a take on it.
But it's an evolution, right? That
Yes,
role,
it is.
that sysadmin that had to keep the lights on, had to deliver the underpinning infrastructure, the platform for the application, whether that's off-the-shelf software or whether it's for a development team, it's still the same aspect. We've got one thing that is there, though, is the responsibility of that data, or how do we automate a lot of this stuff as well? Like, that seems to be another trend is automation.
Yep. So you mentioned something before, though, that I want to return to, if you don't mind, and that is the issue of responsibility. Right? We saw this. I saw it personally in the cloud when cloud first came out.
Yeah.
For security people, it was hard to pry out of their cold, dead hands control over security. But if you were going to put stuff in a public cloud, you had to cede some control.
Yeah.
Because you just didn't have that sort of insight, that sort of control. So you had to give control to the public cloud provider. But what would happen was, when something happened, the fact that it was the public cloud provider who had that control did not limit the responsibility of the security person. I wonder if we don't see a similar thing here.
Yeah, so 100%. So obviously I'm speaking more and more about people that are responsible for data. So replace potentially your security talk track with data, or both, because I think there's a merge in line as well around the security of the data that is very important, especially wherever you're putting it into managed Kubernetes services, into serverless functions within DynamoDB or Lambda functions, etc. Data's still the responsibility has to lie somewhere, or if it doesn't, it will when something bad happens. For workloads, maybe even outside of the Kubernetes cluster, and until the engineering team, that SRE, and it's like the cumbersome data services wrapped around it, observability, responsibility of we do need to protect that.
Yes. Well, there's an old saying. It goes something like, a winner has 1,000 parents or supporters, and a loser is a bastard, right? I mean, no one wants. To that extent, I mean, if you're going to be blamed when something goes wrong, you want to make sure who really has that responsibility, and if it is, what do I got to do with it?
Yeah, exactly. So I think for the last 18 months, we've probably had that security as a big ticket item when it comes to like KubeCon in Detroit, and then before that in Valencia. It was all about DevSecOps, It was about Kubernetes, it was about vulnerability scanning. I actually believe we're going into that time where data and mobility is going to become a bigger talking point, because data responsibility, and we can talk about like ransomware attacks are commonplace. Kubernetes is now an attack vector for those cyber criminals as well. So how do we protect the data? How do we become that remediation effort? How do we get things back to how they were before the bad thing happened?
Well, look, so I sit in a very unique chair. There's nothing really unique about this chair, but you know, we get to talk to a lot of people, we get to see a lot of different things. We've definitely seen a return to primacy of the data, right? Because it is all about the data. We spent so much time over the last years about app security, app development, app deployment, code for the apps, and so forth. We forgot that those were really just the front ends of the data. It was the data all along. Getting that data, storing that data, analyzing that data, giving that information, that intelligence to people, that analysis. It's all about the data. So I for one, I'm happy to see this kind of trend.
So I think also to add to that, like, this isn't new stuff, right? We've been doing data analytics, data management, data copy data management on VMs and physical machine data sets for many years. Kubernetes doesn't change that, other than it's just a different platform. Like virtualization was a different platform. Cloud is a different platform. Kubernetes becomes a different platform that opens up a massive door. Like that's what you see all of these like different vendors here talking about different things around that ecosystem that weren't there for the virtualization days or the cloud. Like a lot of these will be there for the cloud as well, because it spans that cloud computing model as well. So, but I think that data, not only being able to get insight from that data to provide like better business outcomes, but equally about like how do we move that data? Like maybe I've gone into one big hyperscaler, and now cost is a factor, or location is a factor, or regulation, and now I want to move that, and I want to do that in the most efficient way possible. That's going to not cost me a bucket load of money, and I want to make it as seamless as possible. So being able to transform what that data looks like into that other cluster, and I think that's what we're starting to see. People wanting to have that freedom of choice around mobility of data.
Well, I'll give you another scenario, Michael, and that is, you know, we're going to start seeing, I think, a real uptick in M&A activity, especially in the tech sector. And that's another situation where that data mobility or the ability to move data is going to come into play, right? Because what you don't want is a whole bunch of different data silos, each with its own kind of recipe. And so that'll work as well.
So that's a huge benefit of Kubernetes, right? Is that Kubernetes, whether you run it in your own data center, whether you run it in EKS,
or distributed or anything else.
It's a cloud OS, right? Yeah. So I can freely move between the two, but there is going to be some intricacies that, like storage classes are going to be different, and like some of the building blocks are going to be different. So how do we move that data freely between? And so it's something that we're having the conversations with. We can actually help do that as well in an efficient way. So that's it's something that we're talking about.
Michael, did we give a website out?
So Kasten.io or docs.kasten.io is where you going to find out more about what we're up to. The docs are probably more impressive than the marketing spiel. I can say that because I'm not in marketing.
And then we're live here and we've got them all backed up. We got a little bit of a late start.
Obviously, you got to back out.
I want to thank you for coming by, man. It's always a pleasure.
Cheers, Alan.
Caston by Vreem, but it's caston.io.
Yeah.
Check it out. Michael Cade here on Techstrong TV. We're going to take a break. I think we've got the Linker D folks and Buoyant coming up next. Stand by.
Hello and welcome to KubeCon plus Cloud Native Con Europe, and we're talking with William Morgan, the CEO of Buoyant, about service meshes and specifically Linkerd. William, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Great to be here.
I think by now most people know that people get started with service meshes, usually around managing APIs, and it's kind of where they begun, and I think there's some familiarity with that. Do you think, though, that people fully appreciate the implications of that on how networking is managed, how security might be delivered going forward? And there seems to be a lot of downstream impact here that has not been teased out all that well.
Yeah, I think like any category of software, there's this educational process that has to happen, especially over time. So I think at this point, I would say everyone that we talk to, I think, understands the value of a service mesh. They understand that it's something they're going to need. If they're adopting Kubernetes, they'll need it. Do they understand like exactly why or all the implications? Probably not. There's probably a big spectrum there from the experts to the I don't know, I just know I need it. Yeah.
So who's driving adoption of the service mesh then? Is it the developer and then networking and security guys discover it later, or are you starting to see more of the networking and security guys show up at the table in the first place?
Yeah, great question. So it's usually not the developers themselves, at least from the Linkerd, which is a project that I work on. We try and isolate the developers as much as possible from this. They're the ones who are supposed to be writing the application code. They should be focusing on the business logic and all this stuff that the service mesh is doing around security and reliability, kind of decoupled from them. But so our big drivers of adoption, historically it has been the SRE teams, the platform owners, the folks in the organization who are building the internal platform in service of the developers. More recently, we are seeing adoption coming from security teams, coming from compliance, especially in larger organizations, and even a little bit coming from finance teams, in the modern era of everyone being very concerned about how they're spending their dollars.
Right now, what differentiates one service mesh from another from your perspective? Because it seems like we went from nobody knowing what a service mesh is to an abundance of choices.
Right. Well, what differentiates them? Well, one is really, really good. That's Linkerd, and all the rest are terrible. So next question.
All right.
No, I'm kidding. Yeah. I think at the macro level, they're all trying to accomplish the same things. It's like, okay, I'm trying to get from point A to point B. I can take a cruise ship, I can take an airplane, I can take a car, right? At the macro level, they all get me from A to B, but the implementation is quite different and the trade-offs are quite different. So the particular angle that Linkerd has taken, which is kind of a shocking one, is we try and focus on simplicity above all else, so especially operational simplicity. So as soon as you take Linkerd into your environment, how do we minimize the cost, not just the machine cost, but really the human cost to operating this piece of software, which under the hood can be quite complex. That's that's kind of how Linkerd differentiates itself in the market. There's other trade-offs that you might make. You might want a cruise ship. You might want something where you want every possible feature, regardless of and you're willing to take on the cost to do that. That's our differentiation.
How big is the Linkerd community now? Because there's always concerns when it appears that there's only one company driving something. Yeah. So where are we in the development of the community?
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. It's hard. It's always hard to know the exact size of a community because we're not tracking them or whatever. You don't have to register to download Linkerd. You kind of just show up and then you use it, and maybe you talk to us and maybe you don't. I'd say, based on the metrics that we do have around, kind of usage and look at the website and stuff, it's actually grown. It doubled in size in 2022. So which was kind of shocking to me because it's a fairly mature project at this point. You know, it's the first, I think the only service mesh so far to achieve graduated status in the CNCF, which is kind of the top level of maturity. So usually when you get really, really mature, you know, adoption, you hit the kind of S curve in adoption, but it continues to grow. So, you know, I think that's a function of Kubernetes itself, of course, growing. Yeah, the fact that there's one company buoyant behind it, you know, I think in the early days was scary for people, but I haven't had that question for years. You know, I think people are used to that kind of relationship, whether you see it with HashiCorp or other companies. And in some ways it makes things a lot easier, because when someone comes to us and says, oh, we like Linkerd, but we need it to do X, you know, there's one team that we have to talk to, right? There's not 7 different teams pulling in different directions, working at different companies with different sets of priorities. Everyone who works on Linkerd is unified. So in some ways it makes things a lot easier and allows us to be very agile.
By now you've seen a lot of people implement Linkerd. Are there any patterns that you've seen? Are there things that you see people doing that maybe they shouldn't be doing?
Yeah, we definitely have seen a lot of people adopt it, and you know, we have a whole business around helping people adopt it. So yeah, there's a lot of patterns that we see. I think the people that we see do this the most successfully, and what we try and encourage everyone to do is they follow a couple kind of patterns, I guess is the right way to say it. So number one, they will have a platform team. You know, they'll have a team, which sometimes is called the DevOps team, sometimes it's called the Kubernetes team, but they'll have a team whose responsibility is building that platform, and Linkerd is a component of that. And those are the ones who are responsible for choosing, here's the service mesh I'm going to use, here's Kubernetes, you know, here's the CI/CD system I'm going to use. And they own that kind of end-to-end, and they treat themselves as like a, you know, it's a customer service organization for the developers. So having that organizational kind of alignment is really important. I think another thing is you have to be prepared when you bring the service mesh in. But you know, oddly enough, sometimes Linkerd can uncover problems with your application. Your application was, you know, behaving in this weird way, and it's kind of being papered over. And now we add this, you know, layer of infrastructure that's optimizing stuff. It's, you know, routing requests based on latency. It's doing all this fancy stuff that actually can uncover holes in your application. So you have to be prepared. You know, if someone says, hey, this thing no longer works, you know, it might not be Linkerd's fault. You might have just uncovered this, you know, kind of flaw, you know, in the process of adding Linkerd. So you have to be prepared for those conversations. I'd say stuff like that. You know, there's some tactics around that. And then, you know, the big one, of course, is you know, we need a way to demonstrate the value of Linkerd to the rest of the company, right? It's the curse of infrastructure software is, you know, and being in those roles is when things go right, no one remembers your name, and when things go wrong, you get into trouble, right? So like it's all stick and no carrot, right? So if you really want to be successful, and this is another thing we help our customers do, you want to try and get close to the business, you know, the business value, and you want to use the service mesh in some way where you can demonstrate to the business owners, hey, look, here's how we're improving business metrics, right? And if you can do that, then you have a much easier time, you know.
We have seen Kubernetes itself get a lot easier, at least to provision and deploy in the last year. Do you think that maybe we're at the beginning of some sort of simplification movement of the whole cloud native stack? And because there's a lot of moving parts above it that are heavy.
Yeah.
And so the question becomes, you know, are we going to see some effort to streamline the whole stack?
Yeah, it's been interesting to watch things evolve. You know, I think with any of these projects or these kind of areas of technology, there's this initial movement of like, you know, 1,000 flowers blossoming, like all these different things we're trying. And then as the market matures, okay, we figure out the ones that work, and you know, that part becomes less interesting to people, so it becomes more boring, both because it's you know, more, the choices are limited, but also because people are like, okay, we know how to do that, now let's move on to the next thing. So I think that's what we've seen with Kubernetes. Early on, there were a million distributions, a million ways of doing it, people were rolling their own, people were compiling Kubernetes, and now that stuff is like, you know, A, it's unnecessary, B, it's like less interesting because there's new exciting stuff, you know, to go look at. So you see kind of consolidation, you know, and maturity happening there. Same thing is happening with the service mesh. The early adopters of Linkerd, you know, were people who were very enthusiastic about the technology. They wanted to get into the weeds. They wanted to, like, or write the code, and they wanted to really get their hands dirty with the technology. More recently, the market has matured to the point where we have people coming and saying, well, we want to buy Linkerd. And I'm like, well, okay, it's not really how it works, but what they're expressing, when they say that, what they're expressing is, I want Linkerd, but I don't actually care about how it works. I don't want to operate it. I just want it to work in my environment. I want a service mesh, and I want it to work in my environment. And that, of course, is a giant lead up to exactly everything we do in Buoyant, which is, if you come to us and you say, hey, we want Linkerd and we want it to just work, well, that's exactly the software that we provide. We automate everything about Linkerd. We automate the monitoring, we automate the upgrades, we give you all these security policy analysis features and tools. And so everything that you as a company need to adopt Linkerd into your organization without having to hire a team of 6 service mesh experts or whatever it is. So that kind of interplay, is only possible because the market itself has matured, not just for Kubernetes, but for the service mesh.
So where do we go next? I mean, is the mission accomplished, or is there still work to be done here?
I just get to finally relax and, I never have to think about any of this stuff again. No, there's always more. There's always more. The directions that I'm particularly interested in is, and I kind of talked about this earlier, is in getting closer to business value. How do we get the service mesh? How do we get Linkerd to the point where, it's not just solving engineering concerns, but it's solving business concerns. So a lot of the, I'll give you an example. Number one reason for adoption of Linkerd, not the only reason, but the number one reason is MTLS. Okay, great, mutual TLS. Why do you care about that? It's usually compliance, right? It's security often, but it's usually compliance. Okay, so if you're going through all the trouble of adopting a service mesh into your organization to fulfill some regulatory compliance, requirement, well, what can we do to actually make that easier for you? So we've been building all these tools around, okay, let's give you a report. Let's give you like an audit that says, hey, you did all this stuff, you did, layer 7 policy here and MTLS here, and let's draw you the map and let's give you something that you could actually print out and show to an auditor and say, hey, look, you might not understand Kubernetes, but here's our report, here's our analysis, we're 97% compliant, the one exception is here, and blah, blah, blah. And like doing stuff like that's really exciting to me because I'm always trying to drive towards business value. I'm trying to get out of the horrible world of being an infrastructure engineer and just sitting in the dark getting yelled at, and trying to get some of the limelight.
As we go forward, does the service mesh itself sits on top of some proxy software? Does that all start to collapse? Because we have ingress controllers and we've got service meshes and we've got the proxy software, and there's a lot of moving parts. So can that all be kind of condensed in some way?
Yeah, I mean, I have some opinions there because Linkerd has taken a very different tack from the rest of the service mesh world. And one of the things, you asked about differentiation before, one of the things that differentiates us at the technical level is we built our own proxy, and we built it in Rust, and we built it very specific for this purpose of being a sidecar proxy for a service mesh, which gives us all sorts of advantages that other service mesh implementations don't have. But I think to the customer, that's just an implementation detail. Like, you don't really care whether it's a sidecar or something else. You don't really care whether it's this proxy or that. So I think those details do kind of get abstracted away. It's like, okay, what's the CPU in your iPhone? It's like, I don't really care. What I care about is like I can scroll through TikTok really quickly, or or whatever it is. So yeah, I do think that stuff gets kind of fades into the background, which again brings us right back to like, okay, well, what's the business value that you're delivering? How do you make Linkerd a critical component of your business and not just solve a technical problem?
All right, folks, you heard it here. If you don't know what a service mesh is, you should check it out for sure, because it's going to be an important part of the stack. Just be aware that it goes way beyond APIs.
There's no escape.
Well, thanks for being on the show.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
All right. And we'll be back in a minute. Hello, and welcome back to KubeCon plus Cloud Native Con Europe. I'm Mike Vizard, and we're with Misha Van Loofen, and we're from Fiberplane, and we're talking about collaboration and DevOps and how to make people more productive and efficient. Misha, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Welcome to my city.
Thank you.
Or one of my cities.
All right. You guys make essentially the equivalent of a notebook that is familiar to folks maybe who are data scientists as a concept, but kind of new as a concept to DevOps teams and DevOps world. So Explain, if you would, a little bit, what is it exactly the notebook does, and kind of, what are the use cases, and how does it really drive productivity?
Right, sure. Yeah, so it's very much inspired by data science, so Jupyter Notebooks, for those familiar with that. We've completely built it from scratch, so it's our own notebook form factor, and we've done a few interesting things. So one is collaboration is built in, so similar to a Notion or a Figma. You see each other, like real-time typing, all of that. And then in terms of making it DevOpsy, what we've done is we've created this provider model, effectively plugins, that connects the notebook to different observability tools. So this could connect to Elasticsearch, Loki for logs. It could connect to Prometheus for metrics, all sorts of, something for tracing, all sorts of integrations. Those are the fairly obvious ones, but then on top of that, you could connect to, for instance, GitHub to sort of have some visibility on your CI/CD and GitHub Actions and version control. So I'll stop there, and that's where we're at.
All right, and then more recently, you added an open source set of metrics or libraries for collecting metrics, essentially. And how does that plug into the environment, and what can I do with that I previously was unable to do or might have had a harder time doing?
Yeah, it's a great question. So something that we've sort of realized through customer discovery and talking to users is that there's no sort of on-ramp for observability, I would say. It's quite hard to get started with it, and it's quite labor intensive. So in terms of metrics, what you need to do, you need to write instrumentation code to actually generate some metrics. Subsequently, you need to obviously store those metrics somewhere, and then you need to start creating queries to analyze your metric data. Then you want to sort of create alerting rules on top of that. As some threshold gets hit, you want an alert to be fired off. So those elements were the things that people struggle with. So we went back and sort of thought that how can we sort of re-envision sort of metrics. So we've created this project called Autometrics. It's a framework implemented in different programming languages. So Rust, TypeScript, Go, and Python are sort of the four editions. The Rust version is, I would say, is the flagship edition because we're a Rust shop ourselves, so that's the most advanced one. But effectively what it does is you can annotate your handlers, your API handlers, so your functions, with the Autometrics decorator or a macro or whatever meta programming primitive you have in your programming language of choice. And it will generate for you the 4 golden signals for metrics. So it will give you error rate, request rate, response times, all of that out of the box. So for instance, in VS Code, Visual Studio Code, if you're in your IDE, you've got your code base, you hover over that function, you've imported the Autometrics library, you hover over that function, you get a tooltip that says, hey, immediately see the request rate, the response time for this function, and it will could take you to Prometheus to visualize those metrics, could take you to Fiberplane, to a Fiberplane notebook, of course, also to explore that data, or a Grafana dashboard as well.
Is there a disconnect between the metrics that developers see and what the IT operations team sees? And how do I kind of align those? Because the IT ops team is typically using something like a New Relic or whatever, and they have all these dashboards, and then the developers and the SREs have something else sometimes. So how do we kind of standardize and agree what it is that we're all going to collect and kind of get ourselves to, look at the metrics?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I do think with Autometrics, the benefit that it has is that it meets developers where they are, right? You're writing this service, you're building up these functions, you have a clear mental model of how your application behaves and what it looks like, and it makes sense to attach the metrics to those functions. So I think that's a great starting point. Of course, IT operations also have metrics around CPU utilization, right? Like how's the actual infrastructure performing? And those do need to be correlated, of course.
The other issue with observability in particular is people go, well, this is fabulous. I can query this stuff and I can figure out maybe there's an anomaly or whatever. But upon further review, you basically look at them and they go, I have no idea what questions to ask. So how do we kind of make people smarter enough to use the tool to get the answers that are in there or that are hidden in all the data and the metadata?
Yeah, that's a good point. Asking better questions, right? Yeah. So I think it starts off giving at least sensible defaults, right? Again, these 4 golden signals make a lot of sense to track. Yeah, what else?
Do you think then that maybe we'll be using machine learning algorithms and things like that to launch the queries, and maybe we'll only need to launch the queries in the rarer moments when things are overly complex? But I guess how smart can smart get when in terms of the metrics that we surface?
Yeah, I think there's definitely a role around AI, and I don't want to be another AI person, but along the line, like, help me explain this alert, right? So this thing went off, what do I need to investigate? What does this really mean? What should I be looking into in order to get to the root cause of this issue? I think there's a role for AI there. I think we've been talking about the promise of ML ops for a long time. I have seen yet that sort of materialize, to be honest. Auto remediation and like rolling back a service. I think developers and ops people do tend to want to have exercise certain control over what gets rolled back and whatnot, and like deploying a previous version. So I think that part is still tricky.
As we go along, you guys just are relatively young in this whole effort. What's next for you guys? What else can go into a notebook? How does the notebook evolve in your mind?
Yeah. So on the Autometrics front, sort of very interested in getting feedback on it, and sort of new ideas around the framework, new features that we need to build out. It can generate Grafana dashboards, it can generate FiberPlane notebooks, it generates the alert definitions for you. Very interested to hear from the community, like where to take that further. And then in terms of FiberPlane itself, of course, that's going to be the best place to visualize the Autometrics data and analyze on that. So stuff that you can expect is around visualizing the function dependencies and how the metrics across different functions behave. Definitely something around alerting and making that actionable. Service level objectives is another thing that we're investigating. So those are some areas that we're exploring.
You mentioned alerting. Times you talk to a lot of folks and there's too many alerts. There's too much going on and they get a little inured to the whole thing and then they stop paying attention.
You get numb, right?
Yeah. So how do we make it easier to streamline the alerts so that they serve the function that we envisioned for them without overwhelming people?
Yeah, I think that starts off with writing good alerts and SLOs, right? You want to track the right metrics. So again, like Autometrics does help with at least some sensible defaults around that. But then you need to attach certain objectives to that make sense and don't have your alerting system go off all the time, right? So it might not be a problem that a certain API handler does not respond in a certain amount of time, right? Or it could be mission critical, and I think it centers around defining these SLOs in a good way that the entire team agrees upon. So you know what to expect when that alert goes off, and it's not just another Slack channel that you can ignore.
We have now seen, I don't know how many customers you have, but you've seen a number of them deploy FiberPlane and the whole notebook. How did it change the way they operate or function? What's been the downstream impact that you see in these organizations? What's the before and after?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of use cases that we're now seeing emerge, right? So there's the post-incident review, right? Something that happens, we need to sort of codify that knowledge and build up that system of record and that knowledge base such that we're prepared for the future. That's sort of one use case that we're seeing. Like, sort of this knowledge sharing is a big part of that. Also because what you see in organizations that always there's a few people that have either the tribal knowledge or there's sort of muscle memory and being able to capture that knowledge across the organization, such that other team members benefit from that as well. I think that's a big piece of that. There's other use cases around runbooks, right? So automating, actually sort of, that's how we use FiberPlane internally, also codify the runbook when we do a new deploy, the steps that people need to take to deploy a new version of a specific service in our infrastructure.
We hear a lot about DevOps bottlenecks and that this is a process issue. But I have to wonder, ultimately, is this just a failure to communicate, and maybe we need to think about this differently and say, hey guys, it is about sharing the tribal knowledge and all that soft knowledge more so than it is just adding yet another DevOps platform or tool.
Yeah, I also think on top of that, there's a lot of tool fatigue, right? There's so much to install, so many things to try out, and indeed, to your point, maybe it starts off with having better communication and making the knowledge also a bit more, or the information and intelligence actionable, knowledge sharing, and we at least think that FiberPlane has a spot in that domain.
All right, folks. Well, like they say, sharing is caring. So start sharing. Misha, thanks for coming by.
Thanks, Mike.
Hey everyone, we're back here live in Amsterdam for KubeCon, Cloud Native Con. 10,000 people, it's buzzing. Unlike past KubeCons, I have said this earlier. Stu, let me first introduce Stu, then we're going to talk about it. Stu Miniman, he needs no introduction actually on our show. Stu's longtime host over at theCUBE and then went over to the dark side at Red Hat, right?
Yeah, Alan, you and I have known each other for years, and this is the first time we've actually been together on camera, not just sharing notes or a drink on the side here and everything. So thank you so much for having me. Yeah, great community. Look, the sun is shining, the flowers are in bloom, and the state of open source is strong. So, Techstrong even, right?
Techstrong. Stu, you've been at Red Hat 2 years.
Yeah.
What your official title for the record?
Alan, right. So I'm the Director of Market Insights, so I'm part of the OpenShift business unit, which of course is, big piece of what we're talking about Red Hat is the cloud native ecosystem. We are heavily involved in so many of the projects and communities here. We had, 5-minute keynote this morning, big booth. Obviously Red Hat's been involved since, the inception of Kubernetes and all of these projects,
and the cloud, the whole cloud native, and when we look at Red Hat, and there's IBM too, and IBM's the biggest contributor to Linux and to everything else. So when you take this IBM Red Hat conglomerate, they're a big plank in the open source community's support.
Yeah, Alan, you and I are old enough to remember when IBM put $1 billion into Linux.
Remember?
Over 2 decades ago.
When another company said their product's not done till Linux is dead.
Yeah, and hey, come on, Microsoft's a great partner now. Come on, over half of Azure is running on Linux servers.
Absolutely.
We know the joke, Alan. Alan, what is the cloud made up of?
Linux.
Mostly Linux servers. Yeah, so
it's not a joke, it is. But back to what I was saying before I rudely didn't introduce you, Stu. We've got 10,000 people here. And unlike the last several KubeCons, the booths are closer together again. You get the feeling of buzz. You get that feeling of, wow, this is a vibrant, happening community.
Yeah, and I believe 58% of the attendees are first attendees at the show. And as you said, when we first opened the show floor today, there was a buzz and an energy. In Detroit, the show floor would empty out for hours at a time. It's been a good ebb and flow here so
all
far.
Day.
Day one, still everybody's got a lot of energy.
We'll see, but I don't think it's going to ebb too much. The other thing, though, to be fair, it's not that Detroit was a bad KubeCon. It was actually, I think, 6,000 or 7,000 people.
Sure.
But because of COVID, they spread out the booths more.
And just the layout of how things had to be done were not as conducive for the expo hall as opposed to here. Lunch is in here, and there's things here. And as you said, it's
tighter.
Good activity.
It's not a small venue by any means, but it's tighter, and so you feel that more energy. And I guess that means we're officially past COVID? Is that fair to you to say?
Oh
or?
boy, I'm not even going to touch
You're
that.
not going there. You're not qualified.
I hope so. I know that the CNCF actually has, on staff
Still, yes.
somebody to monitor and track that. Was a little personally worried that, when the Dutch government said, like, hey, you can't test or require vaccinations, everybody's a little concerned, and there's some people that might not have come from it, but boy, Alan, you heard there's a wait list of over 2,000 people that didn't get to come to this that might want to.
It didn't affect.
So far, lots of good interactions and great energy here at the show.
I don't know if
let's get into it. Yeah.
I don't know if it's different from Europe to US, but I just don't see it here. But in any event, Stu, we got into a little bit. You guys had a 5-minute keynote this morning.
Yeah.
I heard an interesting fact. I don't know if it was today or yesterday, that OpenShift is now, like, by far the largest distro for Kube.
Yeah, so first of all, when I joined Red Hat, I felt that Red Hat had built a product unlike anything else in the space, because while OpenShift starts with Kubernetes, it is really a lot more for
the whole platform.
And there's lots of different ways to measure it, but you mentioned our power and organization, IBM. I can only talk about financial things when they share it. So when IBM CFO on the Q4 earnings shared that OpenShift had surpassed $1 billion of annual recurring revenue, it's a nice milestone. We all knew when we hit it, but it's exciting to be able to share that with the public.
Talk about it.
And definitely, it's great to talk about code and our contribution and our thousands of customers, but at the end of the day also you say, like, hey, who makes money off open source? And how do
Red Hat was always the shining child of that, right? They
exactly.
were the poster.
And we know that we support a lot in the community and we contribute back, and we do have a profitable business that runs off of
and that's
what
great.
we're doing.
Absolutely. But one of the things, especially for our people at home, Stu, cloud native is so much more than Kubernetes today, and so is OpenShift.
Yeah.
Right? So yes, Kubernetes is in there. Yes, Kubernetes is sort of baseline now. But there's so much more to cloud native. There's so much more to OpenShift. If you wouldn't mind, share with our audience beyond Kubernetes.
Yeah. Alan, happy to. It's something I talk about all the time.
Let's
so first
do
of all,
it.
CNCF says they have 159 projects. OpenShift itself has over 50 projects that make up what we make up, where we either, some of them did we start the project, but most of them we are a significant contributor, we sit on the board of it, or we've given significant code contributions. So, somewhere...
Not only that, there's the people aspects.
Yeah.
Because
the maintainer.
Here's the dirty little secret.
Yeah.
These open source projects don't go off by themselves.
Yeah.
You need maintainers.
Yeah.
You need people contributing code. You need people testing.
Yeah.
You need eyes on code.
Open source is people.
Right.
Right? So we
and that's a
absolutely
big
have that.
part of Red Hat's.
I loved in the opening keynote when I watched the CNCF going through, and they're going through, it's like, oh, there's Argo CD. Absolutely. That's part of our GitOps story and what we're doing. Oh, where's some of the cool expanding things? Things like Backstage. We made a statement last year that we are actively engaged and participating, and we'll see where that leads down the road to what we're doing. So many pieces. Istio has been hot at this show for years.
Absolutely.
It's part
and
of the,
back. For a while it was on the outside looking in, but now it's
we
back.
always have the hype cycle of things, Alan. So you need to reach
there
a
were
certain
politics,
maturity, and there were politics. And let's put the, our friends at Google, created Kubernetes, they created Istio, and they created Knative. You and I both heard both contributors and customers that were hesitant around the governance of it until it became not just kind of Google run, but Google's still top contributor for a lot of these projects, but it's more open into how we're doing things.
I'm glad you brought this up.
Yeah.
Because this is really something that IBM pioneered, and it's something that Red Hat has capitalized on even before the IBM acquisition. And that is the realization of, the rising tide lifts all boats, right? If Google and IBM and Microsoft and AWS and name the big tech company, Meta, if you could all cooperate to create a foundation that we all can build on, and then everyone, the powers of evolution will all build in different ways. but that foundation is solid because of that, call it co-opetition or whatever you want. It benefits the whole ecosystem, and not just the big guys.
Yeah.
You look around, I don't know if you went over and you can't see us at home, but if you go on the other side of this floor, on the other side of this wall, about 200 feet, there's like smaller companies and stands.
Yeah. And there's also the community zone that's there. So Red Hat, we've got a bunch of people staffing that, because most of the people that we send from Red Hat, they're either a speaker and or a contributor, because we know many of the main contributors, that's how you get to be a speaker, and you show the way you're doing.
That's the farm systems where it comes up.
Absolutely.
But that's an important part of it. It's not, with all due respect, it's not just the Red Hats, it's not just the Googles, it's not just the IBMs. It's this whole community, this whole village.
And I mean, Alan, one of the areas that, I like what the CNCF does, and it's similar to what we've done a long time at Red Hat, is it is that participation for everyone, especially the end users. So the CNCF was highlighting, here are some new members of the community. I go through and look at those projects and say, remember which ones of these projects came from the end user community. So Backstage came from Spotify.
Yeah.
And, Lyft brought us the technology, and some of these
not only CNCF, look at CDF.
Yeah.
Right, a lot of Spinnaker is the big one, right?
Right. Argo came from Intuit. And
that's exactly it. Stu, if you don't mind, I want to pivot a little bit.
Sure.
Red Hat, in addition to the 5-minute keynote, did have several
and by the way, the keynote was about sustainability is what the focus was. Project Kepler. So obviously, so we're partnering with, IBM and Weaveworks and Intel are all part of that activity to actually be able to measure how much energy usage the containers are using.
I got to do a quick plug.
Yeah.
Quick plug here on Techstrong. So our sustainability correspondent, we hired a woman named Bonnie Schneider, who's written several books on climate change and was a correspondent at, I forget if it's MSNBC or CNBC, one of them, has now started a new series we're doing called Sustainable IT or something like that. You can check it out on techstrong.com. But we'd love to follow up with you on that, and because that's her thing, and we're going to be really focusing in on that.
Good.
That's good stuff. But there's a bunch of other Red Hat announcements.
Yeah, absolutely. So many of them focus around the project work that we're doing. So, for example, we were just talking about the end user. Ford Motor Company talks about how they're partnering on the Tecton project there, and it's a really good one. Ford actually spoke in Detroit about how the partnership that they had with, of course, we actually had a Ford Mach-E, part of our Cube by Example activity. Ford actually come to us and said, we help them double the people that knew containers and cloud native just by the free resources that we had, and they brought a Ford Mach-E that we got to drive around in Detroit.
That's pretty cool.
And do some interviews there. So the partnership, we help Ford in their journey to be part of the community more and participate in the Tecton project, so they shared what they're doing there. It's funny, we've actually got Audi here. We've got an Audi electric e-tron that's driving around with the Cube by Example again, doing interviews with some customers and contributors in that space too. The KubeCon project had 2 new tracks that got released for this week. One of them is around KubeVirt, and the other one's around Node.js. So KubeVirt project, I'm sure you're aware of, how do we fit, what happens to virtual machines? We all know no technology ever dies or goes away, so how do we embrace virtual machines, bring them into the cloud native management and orchestration environment? Doesn't mean I have to go all containers or throw out my VMs, but some will modernize, some will refactor, but some I'll just keep them as virtual machines for a long time.
Absolutely.
And another update that we had is around the Conveyor project. So it's a series of tools to analyze and help you understand which applications I have, are they suitable for replatforming or refactoring?
I love it. We went through those pretty quick.
Yeah.
Let's just nail down those projects again. There's the Conveyor project.
Yep. KubeVirt.
KubeVirt.
Yeah, and Tecton I mentioned.
Tecton, and Tecton I should mention is the CDF project, not CNCF.
We were heavily participated in Argo CD, which I believe is also
CDF.
from the CDF standpoint.
Yeah.
And I think
there was one other one in between.
Oh gosh.
Beyond Kubetron, another one with Cube in it.
Because the Cube by Example is the website that we have for education, which is not a project itself, but has lots of information about those pieces.
Sure they get it.
Yeah.
Coming at them in rapid fire machine guns
right.
here.
Come on, 159 projects. We'll go through all of them there, as well as the hundreds of cloud services. We'll be here all day. The other updates that we have some good blog posts, some like surveys we did in the security space. Obviously, security always front and center, top of mind, job
Never
zero.
more so than now.
I know the last few shows we've been talking about the secure supply chain and data out there. Like more than half of the customers we surveyed, it was over 500 that we talked to, said that in the last 12 months they have had an incident in their supply chain. So unfortunately, it's not all that surprising.
No.
We were heavily involved in the SigSor project to help work on that and feel that we're making, as a whole, the industry making those pieces better.
So that is next week's news. While we'll be at RSA,
Yeah, of course.
handling DevSecOps software, supply chains, SBOMs, and all of that good stuff. But it is, and I mean, quite frankly, another kind of theme of the whole cloud native community is security, right? The security of whether it's the data security, data ops, applications, open source itself, right? The whole openness sector, it's prime time. And that, that's good for all of us. So, what are you doing in your spare time?
I did go. You and I both got to go see flowers.
Yes, we did some
there.
great tulips.
The
It was
tulips
amazing.
are wonderful. Amsterdam is lovely. I know I'm super excited to be back after having it canceled on us in 2020. So we could just can I erase from my memory the last 3 years?
Well, that's why I said in the beginning, man, maybe we're back.
It's good to be there. We've got, so much getting ready because, and when I get back from this show, we're a month away from Red Hat Summit, which of course is our big event. Red Hat Summit and Ansible Fest is now part of Red Hat Summit this year for the first time. So
where is Red Hat Summit?
It is in Boston.
Boston?
So it's Boston, and I'm sure hopefully your audience know, like end of May, can't ask for a nicer time.
No, it is.
End of May, and of course the fall is when, I love
I'm
New England.
actually there the end of May.
Okay, awesome. Swing on by. You see us. We'll
Absolutely.
be at the Boston Convention Center.
My son lives up there now, so I'm scheduled to go see him June 1. But all right, hey Stu, thank you so much for stopping
Alan,
by.
my pleasure.
We got a lot in here in 15 minutes. I feel like we give these people a chance to digest. But we're going to be here all week. We're live at KubeCon. Stu Miniman from Red Hat IBM. We're going to take a break. We'll be back. Hey, everyone. We're back here live in, I almost said Barcelona. We're back here live in Amsterdam for KubeCon, Cloud Native Con. There was one in Barcelona way back when, I'm pretty sure. Before Valencia, before COVID. But in any event, I'm happy to be joined by Hasib Bhutani. Got it right?
Yes, sir.
Fantastic. We see him every other KubeCon, it seems, right? We didn't make Detroit, but I think you were in Valencia.
You didn't invite me, otherwise I'd been there.
You were waiting for an invitation?
I was an invitation.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll just tell you, we don't do invitations.
I'll be there every time.
Absolutely.
Good to see you again.
It's good to see you. Hasib, not everyone here is going to remember Rafay or what they do, so I'm going to ask if we could start there. Give them a little baseline. What is Rafay and what do you guys do?
We're in the Kubernetes management space. And I said Kubernetes management, not Kubernetes. And the distinction is that enterprises are choosing Kubernetes as the orchestration platform of the future. They're for the containers applications. And then they'll choose Amazon's Kubernetes or Azure's Kubernetes or Google's Kubernetes or OpenShift, right? These are platforms that exist in the market. The challenge is that once enterprises decide to go with Kubernetes, then they build a platform organization that writes automation for provisioning of infrastructure, upgrades, application deployment, policy management, access management, backups, multi-tenancy, network policies. Oh my God, that's a lot of stuff that needs to happen so that you can consume Kubernetes in the right way and your developers can move fast. This platform layer we sell as a product so that my customers don't have to reinvent the wheel again and again and again. They can buy it and be up and running in production in a month versus take the next 2 years and build a platform. That's the value that Rafay brings to enterprises.
Love it. And just before we jump into the rest, the website for Rafay is rafaysystems.com or Rafay?
Rafaysystems.com or rafay.co.
Okay, that's RAFAY.co, just like it says it on there. And it's .co. Okay. We got that out of the way. Now let's focus in on, this is 10,000 people, we're back, but you know, no one's mentioning the big C word anymore. We're not wearing masks. It's all good. Nevertheless, macroeconomic conditions have kind of changed the market.
Absolutely.
And, you know, and any time there's change, there's winners and losers. It's just the way of the world. You guys have been kind of capitalizing on these conditions. Explain to us.
Yeah, absolutely. So, a big value that we deliver was valuable before the economy turned, and it is valuable now, which is, look, end of the day, Alan, the way I think about our business is we are in the people business, right? The problem we solve, were Rafay to never exist, it would be solved by people. The challenge is that there's not enough talent in our industry.
Nope.
Right, so if every enterprise in the world needs 20, whatever number of people, 10, 20, 30 people, depending on the size of the organization, man, there's not enough talent in the market, right? I mean, it's not possible. So in any case, there was need for automation so that we could augment these teams so these enterprises could move faster. So that's what our business was when the economy was awesome. Now the economy is doing not as well, and many of these enterprises are looking for a way to solve the same problems, but they're looking at their TCO, right? They're looking at their budgets and they're saying, wow, this is, like, you know, building massive teams is really expensive. I have the talent I need here. How can I leverage my existing talent and do more? So what we're doing is, we are essentially, again, same thing. For the existing teams, we're telling them with Rafay software, you can now move a lot faster with Kubernetes, and you don't need to add on more headcount to your team, because the reality is, even if you want to, leadership is not going to let you add headcount in this economy, right? But still, the projects need to go on, right? And truly, this is how I think about it. Like, we're augmenting teams. In fact, Alan, I say this a lot. I say, when you work with us, it's as if you hired a guy named Rafay.
Right.
You're going to hire people anyway. You're going to hire me. I'm just going to bring my 200 people with me, and we're going to solve your problem for you, right? Because, and this is the most fundamental kind of fact now. Every enterprise, healthcare, financial services, high tech, they all have exactly the same problem when it comes to Kubernetes automation. Why are we all building it when we could buy it?
I don't disagree with you at all. Now, sometimes though, look, there's no doubt, people are the most expensive piece in the equation, and oftentimes the most difficult to source. Nevertheless, there are some organizations that they don't embrace automation. How's that for a good word, right? They don't embrace it. They're skeptics. How do you overcome that skepticism?
Yeah, you know, I think the great part about this industry is that our customers are actually, man, they're really smart people. You know, they're all really smart people, right? And they make data-driven decisions, right? So they want to try it out. So one of the things we've done here is, you know, we tell our customers or prospective customers, hey, look, I don't know whether our product can solve a problem for you or not. I have no idea. Only you can determine whether this is going to make your life better. I cannot. I can only tell you what it does.
Right.
And then you're going to decide whether it's today's the right time, or 6 months, or never. It's okay. But the only way you will learn is, you know what, it's a SaaS product, I'm going to give you access, take as long as you want. All good. Kick the tires, here's some documentation, we're not going to bother you. And, you know, by building a model where we provide this kind of no pressure engagement model, that I find has worked really well for us as a company. Because again, these are very technical, very smart people. They don't like to be pushed. They don't like to be pressured into buying, for example, or even a POC. So long as you are very honest about what is possible and what is not, I find that, you know, people are making some really, really good decisions. And the reality is, not everybody's going to be my customer, I get it, but most will be.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And that's great.
Absolutely, and it is a great thing, and that makes, you know, I always say, in uncertain economic times, the next great companies are
absolutely
forged. Let me go in another direction a little bit. You can't walk more than 3 feet without tripping over AI today, right? It's AI this, generative that, GPG this, GPT that. What role is that playing in the Rafay automation kind of universe?
Yeah, look, today it doesn't, right? Because we've been focused on building what we're building, and we have to be on a path we're on. But there's two angles we see in terms of how something like ChatGPT could help us and our customers. And I'll tell you both of them. So one is we have sort of audiences inside an enterprise that are not technologists. Like FinOps is an audience for us, right? Because we have a chargeback engine in our product that tells the customer, this team costs you this much money, et cetera. But those people have sometimes very interesting questions, and I don't have an a priori dashboard for them, because I've never thought about the question they're going to ask. What if that data could be made available to them, and they could converse and collect the data they want? That's a great use case, because we have an API interface, we have a user interface, we have a CLI interface. Why not a conversational interface? That makes so much sense.
Absolutely.
Right? We should do that. And we will do that, by the way.
Hey, just make sure you give me credit for
because it was Alan's idea. Right?
Call it the Alan
interface. The Alan concept.
Yep.
And the second use case is we have young engineers who we hire. So we hire a lot of really smart engineers in India. You're young, new in their careers. It takes them time to learn our platform. So before they're productive, it takes 6 months before they're productive.
Yep.
What if the mundane stuff that they have to learn, we could it just comes along, and they don't have to learn it. So as they're writing code, some of these things just come along. That'd be kind of cool, right? Which means if I could cut, a quarter of time of learning,
25%
of the salary.
Yeah.
Right, it's a lot of money, right? That to me is a very interesting use case. So these are the two things we think about in the company. And what I tell the product management team is, don't get caught up on the hype that because everybody else is doing ChatGPT, that's why I must do it. No. Really understand what the real value is for our customers. If you don't see any value, don't do it. And if you see these two as good ideas,
then
prioritize accordingly.
The interesting thing here is I think we're at the beginning of this, not the beginning or the end of the beginning.
Yep.
So I think it's going to be interesting to see. There'll be more ideas. Let's pivot a little bit. Let's talk about this KubeCon. We started off talking about it. What are you hearing from the people at your booth? I saw the booth was pretty crowded.
Yeah. So, look, 2-3 years ago, when we'd all go to KubeCon, we'd meet essentially developers.
Yeah.
Right? Or open source enthusiasts, right? Which is great, and we have a bunch of those people here too. But I've met a bunch of large enterprise platform leaders.
Yep, we're seeing platform engineers, we're seeing more SREs.
Yep.
Look, we used to call them system administrators, but ops people.
Absolutely, like you go to a reInvent, you'd expect these people to be there, which makes sense, right? But here, the percentage is significantly higher than what I remember from Valencia. Right? And
I don't disagree.
And I think that is indicative of how important Kubernetes is becoming to enterprises. It's not a toy anymore. They're running real production applications on Kubernetes, and they're looking for better and better ways to optimize their environments so that they can have a better operational infrastructure. Right? So, and look, end of the day, that's our customer, frankly, right?
Yeah.
Like we don't sell to a developer, right? The developer is my customer's customer. So look, we have to get our ICP right? Our ICP is platform engineering, and their customers is developers. We have to make both happy, but developers are not my customers. So we look for those customers, we understand their expectations in platforms, we understand their needs, and if I may say so myself, we build the best product in the market to solve their problems. That's why we have so many customers.
I wouldn't expect you to say anything else. You're their CEO, of course you built the best product you have. But again, kudos to you and the team, because it's one thing for you to believe it, it's another thing for people to vote with their pocketbooks and their feet and their fingers and so forth, and they have. I mean, I've watched Rafay come up over the last few years here, I remember. So it's fantastic. Anything else new at the show, announcements, news, anything?
Absolutely. So, one big problem that we've thought about for a long time, but we weren't you got to be tall enough to solve certain problems, right? So we announced, and we are doing sort of a preview at the booth of a tool called Environment Manager. The idea is that a modern application is not just Kubernetes. It's Kubernetes, it's Lambda, it's RDS, it's Kinesis, it's all these other things that come together to build a modern application. How do you orchestrate them all? in a repeatable fashion. So we find that this is a very interesting gap. Right, so now Terraform exists, Terraform Cloud exists, and Spaceloft exists, and N0 exists, and these are obviously very good products. But the sort of the templatization and the automation needed, like do this first, do this next, then try this thing, make sure this worked, file a ticket, do this next, right? Kind of build a whole workflow of an environment. That seems like a gap in this industry. And we've built a platform to do that. Now this is an early version of this, right? So we're showing it to developers right now just to get their feedback. And we've designed it to kind of work very nicely with N0 or Spaceloft on all these products. But this to us is the next sort of iteration of Rafe. We feel that on the Kubernetes side, we have a really strong foundation, and it's going to allow us to be a defensible platform for a very long time. But then we got to go beyond Kubernetes and solve the broader problem. Now we're going to be working on this for 2 years, right? It's going to take a long time to perfect it. But this allows Rafe to solve a bigger problem for my customer. Same ICP, same people.
I get it.
But the problem is so much bigger. And it allows us to not be a Kubernetes company anymore. It allows us to be a modern application automation company. And I think that is a public company.
You heard it here first.
Yeah.
2 years.
Yeah, we'll get there.
I hope so. Congratulations, It's good to see you,
man.
Yeah,
good to see you as well. Thank you for having
me. All right.
me.
Did we mention the website?
Yeah.
Yes, rafe.co.
Yes, sir.
I just want to make sure we tell people out there. All right, we're going to take a break. We're live here at KubeCon. We'll be right back. We're here. We're in Amsterdam at KubeCon in this beautiful hangar. I want to introduce you to Uma Mukara. Uma, the last time I interviewed Uma, he was with a chaos engineering firm that had just been acquired by Harness, and I guess it's been a year now, or?
A little bit more than a year since we joined
Harness. Probably Valencia last year, maybe?
That's exactly correct. So we were just acquired by Harness. I came to Valencia, and then we talked about the reasons for me to join Harness. Being the creator of Litmus, etc. Nice to be here again.
And now, the Litmus product, the chaos engineering product, as an official Harness release is GA'd.
Yes.
So that's a big milestone. And is it still called Litmus within Harness, or is there a name for it now?
Litmus Chaos is the open source project that continues to be governed by CNCF. It is an incubating project, and the enterprise version for Litmus Chaos is available on the Harness platform. Harness is basically a platform that provides multiple product features that are required for DevOps, right? For example, CI, CD, feature flags, cloud cost management, and chaos engineering is one of the modules, right? So what we did after coming to Harness is we took Litmus as the underlying base and integrated totally into the Harness platform and added many more enterprise capabilities. So now the product is called Harness Chaos Engineering. It's kind of an end-to-end chaos engineering solution for enterprises that's powered by Litmus Chaos. And that's what went GA a couple of months ago.
Excellent. I'm glad we got that out of the way. One other thing, of course, Harness. Is it harness.io?
Yes, that's harness.io.
So you get more information on it there. Uma, I want to focus in on chaos engineering, though. Look, chaos engineering burst on the scene, I guess, with the Netflix and Chaos Monkey and so forth. It's got to be 8 years ago, 7 years ago now, maybe more. 10.
Yeah, it is a little bit more, maybe 11 years now, right? So that's how chaos engineering was introduced. It's been a long ride for chaos engineering itself, and moving to Kubernetes, the big movement to Kubernetes has changed the way the use cases for chaos, right? Earlier, chaos engineering was mainly for break things in production. You're a big guy trying to run ops in a smooth way, and you need chaos, and you have to be an expert. But there's now a natural use case that's brought to you to the fore by Kubernetes itself. Now you're dealing with tons of microservices, and you want to ship this microservices very, very fast, right? And you need to keep your developers very productive doing that job, right? You don't want your developers to ship something and then come back and debug because you leaked a bug into the production, right?
Sure.
So that's where chaos engineering can come and help you improve your developer productivity by running the chaos tests in the pipelines, and every time you ship something to the right, make sure the reliability of the code is protected by running chaos tests in the pipeline. So now we see a lot of usage of chaos engineering is actually happening on the pipelines.
Yeah, today it is. But, there's been a maturity of the thing, though, too, right? I think a lot of organizations looked at chaos engineering as experimental, and I don't mean any disrespect.
No.
But it was experimental, not mission critical kind of stuff, right?
Yeah.
Or, must have. I always like to say, if you don't have a must have, you don't have something. I think chaos engineering has crossed over to a must have.
Now it is, yes. So it is good to have for SREs running large organizations, and for the reasons that I talked about just now, it's kind of a must have for a fully automated DevOps shop, right? Just imagine your developers running a lot of debug time in something that they could have avoided easily by automating, right? So it's kind of becoming a must-have developer tool rather than a good-to-have large ops tool. Of course, the chaos engineering is still keeping its relevance to all the SRE and ops, but the way I see it is chaos engineering is creating new use cases as a developer tool itself. And that's why you see shift-left chaos engineering, and there is a new term called continuous resilience, right? So there is a continuous deployments, continuous integration. Very similar to that, you now have a new concept called continuous resilience, where developers, QA, and deployers, and ops people, all are considering resilience as a way to deal with it, right? So definitely it's become a kind of a must-have for DevOps.
I agree with you. Now, full circle back to what we were talking about, you had mentioned that, Harness has become more of a platform with different modules, and that the chaos engineering module, which is based on Litmus, is just but is another module within the Harness platform.
Yep.
What about integration?
Right. I mean, that's precisely the reason why I joined Harness, because Harness is a platform that helps you cover all the enterprise features. For example, you need to have good RBACs and ACLs, you need to have good authentication, good security measures. So imagine you have a great set of chaos experiment suite and you want to give it off to enterprises. They love the technology. At the same time, they need to have the great set of governance features. So the Harness platform provides just that, right? So chaos experiments backed by Litmus Chaos, at the same time the enterprise governance features and authenticating features, logging, monitoring, or dashboarding, everything is provided by the Harness platform itself, right? That's one. And also it integrates well with other Harness modules. For example, CD, continuous deployment. You can now push chaos experiments into the pipelines at the click of a button. You can integrate with the SRE monitoring solution, SRM, the Service Reliability Management Solution. You can also see a good integration with Harness feature flags. So now what we're doing is make chaos easy to use in all facets of developer lifecycle.
Got it. Fantastic, man. Finally, what about the show?
That's great. I mean, I would love to come to KubeCon and meet people and learn new use cases. Yesterday we talked about using chaos engineering for telco grade. There's a lot of adoption of Kubernetes by telcos. Now they're actually feeling the need for how do you manage the resilience, right? So now more of the requests that I'm seeing here is, we need chaos engineering. How do I go about it? Do you have any best practices? It's not anymore about, do you need chaos engineering? So I use this KubeCons to validate some of my thoughts, listen to various, experts, practitioners. It's always great. And this time, this venue is so big. I see a lot of crowd as well coming and speaking to us at the booths and in the talks. It's been great. KubeCon is always great, and again, I get to meet you as well here.
It's our pleasure to have you here.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, we have people can't see because the camera's faced that way. On this side of us, we have the a booth by the Rancher Seuss people, and they have soccer balls being kicked. It makes this loud noise. I don't think it comes out on our thing because our mics are good, but it's loud. Anyway, Uma, I want to thank you for coming on.
Sure.
It's a pleasure. No, sit, we got to say goodbye.
Oh, okay.
Again, you go to harness.io, look up the chaos engineering module, or also, look, if you're into the open source, go check out the Litmus project. It's fantastic. We're going to take a break. We're live in Amsterdam, right near the Rancher Seuss soccer shooting target practice. We'll be back in just a minute.
Thank you.
We're back here live in Amsterdam at KubeCon, continuing our day one coverage of Cloud Native Con and KubeCon. I'm really happy to introduce you now to Shaul Rosen. Shaul is the CEO of ARMO, ARMO. Shaul, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. So let's start a little bit about your background, if you don't mind. Share with
no
our
problem.
audience.
I'm, I've been around for a while, engineer by profession, kind of like did my move into the business world when I did my MBA in the University of Pennsylvania in the Wharton Business School. Was a management consultant for a while before coming back to tech, where is my passion. I was a strategy officer for a startup called Optimove, which we took from like $0 to $40 million ARR in a few years before actually founding ARMO together with my co-founders, and been doing that for the last few years, really enjoying that.
What could be bad?
Yeah,
Yep. Tell us the ARMO story.
So ARMO, what we're about is Kubernetes security. We feel like Kubernetes is a little bit of a different beast in the Kubernetes or in the security landscape, in the sense that many of the security decisions are moved actually to the DevOps, and much of the responsibility is moved to the DevOps. Not to mention the different, complexity of security within Kubernetes with all of the different configurations and declarative motions of it. So, we are the company behind Kubescape, which is probably the largest or fastest growing Kubernetes security open source project right now. We donated it to CNCF just towards the end of last year. It's the first KubeCon after that, and it's kind of exciting.
Congratulations.
Yeah, we had the first CNCF Kubescape meeting, maintainers meeting. We had over 40 people coming, which was super interesting, super fun to have. So it's really, really exciting times.
Absolutely. So tell us about Kubescape.
So Kubescape basically takes your Kubernetes cluster, scans it for misconfigurations, vulnerabilities, RBAC, role-based access control over privileges, and puts all of that across all of your cluster in a single pane of glass for any developer and DevOps person to look at. It is basically running as an operator within your cluster, takes all the data out and makes it available to you. We've seen it growing. We have hundreds of thousands of users already using it. It's great to be part of that community. Slack channel active. Everybody should join the Slack channel. It's a CNCF channel. Very vibrant GitHub community. Super exciting.
So let me ask you a question,
Yeah.
just between you and I. How much of a difference have you seen in the community since Cubescape became an official CNCF project.
So I would say that if you think the best way to look at it, I would say, is volume versus quality. So it's not that the volume of the community exploded. It was large before, it is still large, but we don't see like a tremendous ramp up. But we've seen more and more quality contributors and quality participants since we've joined CNCF. The move to the CNCF Slack from our own Slack. So that now the discussions there are much more deep, much deeper discussions, much more quality discussions. So I think that's the biggest, I would say, contribution that we got from CNCF. And also the level of credibility. You know, we have much more credibility now as a part of the CNCF.
Love it. Now, you know, it used to be sort of a rare thing, but today it's very common that you have a commercial entity created, maintains an open source project run by a Linux Foundation.
Yeah.
And then the commercial entity builds a commercial business around this.
Yes.
Sometimes it's like an open core where they're offering additional modules. Other times they offer it as a hosted service, a SaaS version, versus having to run it yourself. Other education, support, etc. What is Armo doing around Cubescape?
So our monetization model is based, as you said, and I think that's the most logical one, on a managed service cloud solution. So we have developed a SaaS version on top of Cubescape, which is called the Armo platform. And users who use it can get accessibility to Cubescape across all of their clusters without the hassle of managing it, installing it, configuring everything. So that's the main monetization venue that we're going through. The second one is an enterprise version, on-premise enterprise version that we basically give support for. We give all the, you know, all of the surrounding that you need in order to run it safely and securely in your environment.
Fair enough. And so that's offered like as a SaaS type of program monthly and so forth. Where is the, what, not you, but customers, you know, they initially, I'm going to assume they initially download the open source project. They look at it, they like it, they see it. What is it that kind of puts them over to say, okay, I want to do the managed service version?
Yeah, so I think one of the things is that our managed service is also built in tiers. So you have a free tier that you can sign up for free, up to a certain number of worker nodes, and you can test it out. So that puts down the barrier of actually moving into that and seeing that if it works for you, very, very low. So we get thousands of users like every month joining that service. And then when they see that and they love it and they increase their usage, then moving them to a paid version is really about, you know, you see the value, let's connect and let's see, you know, how we can make it worthwhile.
Excellent, excellent. Sure, we hit on a bunch of things. Anything we missed?
So, you know, one thing that I probably should mention is that we launched a new feature, actually.
You should probably mention
today,
that.
Yesterday.
Yeah, that'd be a good idea.
Yeah, which I believe is like super important and super relevant for users, which is basically, we call it the relevancy feature, which is, you know, today people scan containers all the time, and you scan the entirety of the container, and you scan libraries that you are not actually using, and you get hundreds or maybe thousands of different vulnerabilities. We identify that 60% of them are actually in software artifacts that you are not using in your environment. So while we are in your environment, we know what's running in your environment, we can deprioritize them. And we actually reduce like 70% of the work and the critical vulnerabilities, and that's something that users asked us for, and I think it's a great thing that we're adding to the system.
Where can they get more information on that?
Well, first of all, armosec.io, that's the easiest thing to go.
Let's make sure. Armosec, ARMOSEC.io.
Yep.
Okay. Excellent. And what about Cubescape? Where can they, that's a GitHub?
So just Google Cubescape and our GitHub will be the first result. actually go there. The relevancy feature is also available there, which is something amazing. Not many people, do that and contribute to the open source such innovative things.
Right.
So I really recommend you to check it out.
Excellent. Hey, thanks for coming on.
Pleasure.
Enjoy the rest of KubeCon. We're live in Amsterdam. We're going to be right back with another guest in just a hot minute here. All right, we're back. We're back here in Amsterdam. We are, I guess, well into almost the end of the day. Actually, is there a thing tonight on the floor?
I think there's a thing tonight on the floor, and then pretty much every night there's different events.
Oh, there's crazy parties, but no, tonight, opening night on the expo floor, I think there's some sort of event or whatever, happy hour, whatever it is. So, but anyway, I want to introduce you to Knox Anderson. Knox is with Sysdig. Hey, if you're a regular watcher of Techstrong TV, we cover Sysdig a whole bunch. I know, Knox, I was talking off camera. I recently did an interview with, I guess it's like, she's a former Gartner person, I think, or something, right? Who works in your research team there.
Yeah, Anna Bellick.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yep, did a nice report on a survey report that you guys had done. But Knox, welcome, man, here to Techstrong TV, live at KubeCon.
Thanks, happy to be on again.
So let's start with this. For people who maybe don't remember you, I'm sure everyone remembers you, at least your mom, your significant other, someone's watching, right? But besides them, tell people a little bit about your story.
Yeah, so I run product management at Sysdig. I've been here 7.5 years, so this is probably my 13th or 14th KubeCon if we're looking at North America and Europe. But Sysdig is
counting the virtual ones.
Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe the in-person.
Oh, really?
Like pre-Linux Foundation KubeCons had a few of those under my belt. So
very cool.
It's been a while, but yeah, Sysdig provides container and Kubernetes security, and we're really differentiated around the runtime side. So you probably heard of Falco, which is our open source project.
Yes.
And that provides threat detection for containerized and kube environments as well.
But correct me, but Falco's not a CNCF project, or it is now?
It is a CNCF project. We're in the incubation. Correct.
Yep. Very cool. I think we covered that on Techstrong TV as well. Anyway, so Knox, well, Sysdig.com for anybody who wants to get more information, and they could, catch the Falco project via the Cloud Native Computing Foundation site, or from the Sysdig site too, I believe.
Yeah, and then there's also falco.org.
Falco.org.
Or the GitHub page is the other easy one.
Right, you could skip the line and go to falco.org.
Yep.
So, Knox, you mentioned that you've been to a lot of KubeCons. I've been to probably not as many as you. I think I've been to, I want to say 8.
Mm-hmm. It's a good amount, yeah.
Yeah, 8 or 9. I could take off my shoes and do my, but something like that. But this one, it feels like it's back, right? What's your impression?
Yeah, it really even started yesterday, where you had a lot of the different hands-on events. So we ran like a hands-on Falco workshop where people are seeing active threats, trying to detect them. What do you do next? And so I think the energy you feel about people getting hands-on, people going by the booth, people are just happy to learn. But I'm also surprised by the amount of first-timers here. That's something I always ask, and probably 50% of the people, it's their first KubeCon. So
absolutely. You know what? You're the second person who's brought this up today. I think part of that is just this industry, right? There's always new people coming in. But I think another big part of it is because of what we've gone through the last couple of years with COVID, there have been people who, just listening to that, there have been people sort of who have been in a suspended animation, right? They got into this industry 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago. Normally, you would have seen over the last 2.5 years, you would have seen a percentage of these people being first-timers at each of the shows. But because it was either virtual or if it was in person, it was not as dense. They didn't go. So now all of a sudden it's like you built up this pent up demand for 2 years, 3 years, and people are here. So it's probably a little of that. Here's another observation that I've heard from people and from what I've seen, and if you want to chime in, is that older KubeCons were 75, 85% developers. We're seeing a lot more platform engineers, SREs, sysadmins, ops folks.
And even security folks joining as
And
well.
security,
Yeah.
well, but security's always been here. Security's been part of it. I'll give KubeCon that, right? Security people knew they had to be here.
Yeah, it's
And
the
it was-
only place to learn for a long time. Yeah.
Absolutely. But security for the platform engineers, for the SREs, for all of these new kind of expertise, these new job functions is here in a big way as well, including Sysdig.
Yeah, and I think the reason why platform teams are becoming more important is Kubernetes is kind of the operating system of the cloud.
Yep.
So more people are being pushed for multi-cloud, people are being pushed for hybrid cloud, and I think it was kind of fake until Kubernetes adoption got real, and then you can actually go across these different environments. So the way to do it right is to have a platform team that makes it as easy as a developer to onboard to the platform as possible. And so we're having really good conversations with them about baking in security into your IAC flow. So as soon as you develop a Helm chart, make sure that's secure. Remediate that from production into source. And so these platform teams are kind of a facilitator through a bunch of different groups. And I think the companies who have seen do Kubernetes right always have some type of dedicated platform team.
Agreed. Another observation. I just sit here and observe. I should be like an observability person. But
That's a loaded term.
Yeah,
You
I
gotta
know.
be careful
I was
there.
just throwing it out there for the audience. But another observation we've seen, and I've heard from people sitting where you're sitting today, Knox, is we used to try to really focus on shift left. So move security, let's say, to the developer. Move CI/CD to the developer. Move testing towards the developer. Everything was being shifted left to the developer. I think part of what we're seeing in today's cloud native world with everything is we're asking developers to shift right.
Yeah.
Right, so they're working with the platform team. They're working with the SREs. You know, they're moving, as much as we're coming to them, they're moving this way as well.
And the thing I think that's really related to that is even if you shift left, you still have the noise problem. So you're uncovering the same vulns that you would have seen in production. You're just doing it a little bit earlier.
Yeah.
So that noise issue and that just I have 80,000 vulnerabilities to fix is something that is still there if you shift left. And so the shifting right part is really important because runtime context is what allows you to understand what to fix. And that's one of the main ways we're helping users right now. And it's also a good part of our partnership with Snyk is we can tell people, hey, this vulnerability is in a package your application is actually using. And that cuts up to 85% of the noise. And so the last thing people want to do is just create more noise by shifting left, get another pile of JIRA tickets. And so by really focusing on what's happening in the right and what's going on, you can prioritize a lot better as well.
I agree with you 100%, man. So I gave you all my observations. Let's hear some more of yours.
Yeah, so I think that operational and right focus is something that's coming more into play. So the past couple of years, there's been a lot of, hey, do I have Kubernetes up and running? Am I onboarding teams? And now I think that's handled well, but it's, okay, I need to get FedRAMP compliant. I need to be PCI compliant. I need to manage the cost of my Kubernetes environment. So like getting Kubernetes stable, I'd say most of this audience knows how to do. And now it's, all right, my CFO is asking for chargebacks. I need to meet this new regulatory compliance standard. And so you're seeing kind of the day two problems come up, which is
but it's a good thing.
Good sign, yeah.
It's a good sign. It's a sign of maturity and evolution of it. So that's huge. That's huge. Hey, we mentioned you guys recently did a survey and a report. It was, I think, the state of cloud security.
Yep.
anything big in there you just want to throw out to the audience?
Yeah, so one of the interesting points we found is 72% of containers run for 5 minutes or less.
Yep.
And this also brings up some of the needs for runtime security and that write focus. If you're using like a traditional CSPM product or you're doing scanning and you scan once a day, you're going to miss almost everything.
Yeah.
And so you really need some type of active runtime monitoring and runtime security to get that real-time nature against those 72% of containers that are running 5 minutes or less. The other interesting part that is kind of depressing is we've seen, on average, customers run 16 daemon sets. And so you're basically running 16 tools on a node for a Kubernetes environment, and on average we're seeing 64 containers. So that's basically saying like 25% of my node is just boot up tooling. And the main mistake that I see with a lot of customers is they think about host security or host monitoring and container security and container monitoring as different things. And you really need to try to consolidate those as much as possible. Like at the end of the day, your Kubernetes containers are still running on a server somewhere, and you should consolidate that protection. And so that's where I think cost is now forcing people to step back and look like, oh, wait, I have something scanning my host, I have something scanning my containers. Maybe I should just use one. And that 16% or 16 daemon sets number was the thing that definitely personally surprised me the most in that survey.
Absolutely. They can get that survey at sysdig.com?
Yeah, sysdig.com, we're promoting it. The other big thing we found is waste that's happening. So over 60% of containers don't even have request and limits defined.
Right.
And so you're running all these workloads, you might be over provisioning them, you might not even be putting limits in place, so they're unbounded. And so there's just those day two problems of how do I right size my workloads, how do I have the right cluster. There's a lot of benefits from Kubernetes from a cost perspective, but if you're not using the native constructs, you can't realize any of them. And so I think that's been a bigger focus, just as I see different booths. You're hearing cost, everyone's obviously paying attention to the macro environment, and that's something that in the past 6 months we've also had a focus on, is just how do you right size those workloads and make cost management much easier in a Kubernetes perspective.
Across the board, man. Hey Knox, I want to thank you for stopping by.
Yeah,
it's a great conversation. Great to see you. Knox Anderson, product manager, Sysdig, sysdig.com. Check them out. We're live here. I think we got maybe another hour almost of interviews. So stay tuned. We'll be right back in a minute. Hey everyone, we're back here trying to wrap up day one of our KubeCon coverage. It's still humming and bopping and buzzing here.
Really
but I want to introduce you to Amir Montazeri. Amir is with ostif.org. He's going to tell you all about it. We've had Amir on, was it in Detroit, Amir?
It was Austin. Open Source Summit last year, yeah.
That's right, in the hallway.
In the hallway, that's right.
I remember now, yeah. Hey Amir, welcome back anyway.
You.
No, thank you
so
so
happy
much.
to be back.
Thank you. So before we jump into what OSTIF is and what's going on, why don't we do a little bit of your background?
Sure, absolutely. My name is Amir Montazeri. I'm from Chicago, born and raised there. I originally got my schooling in business and finance before going into IT auditing. And what was really cool about that was I got to work as an internal auditor overseeing the US payments channel. So I got to really see what the most rigid security requirements, measurements, and mitigation strategies out there look like. And then when we started OSTIF, Open Source Technology Improvement Fund, to specifically focus on helping open source projects with their security needs and security auditing, I was able to incorporate a lot of that knowledge and best practices from internal audit practices and kind of marry that with the complexities of the open source space, and especially when it comes to security. And here we are 8 years later. I'm really happy to say that just in the last month we actually grew the team. Finally, we had our first staff hire and immediately after had one more. So I'm really happy to
Up
say
to
that.
3, that's great.
Yeah, we're
Good for
growing,
you.
and it's going to definitely allow us to do more for the open source community.
So, we're here. What's kind of new with OSTIF for KubeCon? Any announcements or any kind of goings on?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, a lot has happened in the last almost year now. I think it was June. It was in Austin. We have been very busy. We have a lot of new work done with the CNCF as one of their main partners for doing these security audits. We make it really easy. So really we just get a project and take them through the whole process and complete it with an audit report. So one really nice thing we did was a impact report for CNCF where we aggregated all of the results from the last year to really show in aggregate the work that we're doing. So I was really proud of that, as well as our first annual report, practice that I saw as a best practice with a lot of other similar organizations, and we're so focused on transparency as really a tenet of our organization. We thought, a annual report would be a great way to aggregate all of our work, to showcase our work, and provide, evidence of our effectiveness.
I get it.
So yeah, so I'm really happy to be here in Amsterdam, meeting with a lot of the project contributors and maintainers that we've been working with, and just taking it all in. It's a lot. It's a
crazy
big conference.
It's a crazy conference, man. Crazy conference. So the website is ostif.org.
That's right. It is a bit of a mouthful, but it's very succinct when you kind of say it a bunch of times. But that's Open Source Technology Improvement Fund.
Absolutely.
So,
I just wanted people to be able to know that, right?
Absolutely.
It's ostif.org.
Yes.
What do you think is, as we sit here now and we can see this thing really kind of coming back to life, because it's been a rough couple of years with COVID and everything.
Indeed.
Where do you see it going now from here, Amir?
Well, it's great to have people back in person. I would say one of our most successful audits was pre-COVID, where the audit team we had picked for a project, and the core maintainers were just a short train ride away from each other. So we were able to facilitate a in-person, all hands on deck kind of meet where, because we're so focused on collaboration, they were able to do it, very directly. And that was actually one of our most successful security audits. So it's great to see the in-person interaction back, building that rapport with folks. I love it, and it's great to be
both, man.
In Amsterdam, in Europe.
Have you had a chance to explore Amsterdam a little bit?
Not quite yet. Still getting over the jet lag, but
okay, so we've been here a few days.
Yeah.
So we've been out to the flower gardens,
Nice.
and the museums.
Very nice.
And the Anne Frank and the Jewish Quarter kind
Very
of
nice.
tour there, and then sampled some of the wares they sell around
Indeed,
here in
indeed.
Amsterdam. It's all good.
It's all good.
It's
Yeah.
all good, man. Hey, Amir, I have no more other questions, but if people want to get involved or maybe, I should have asked this. Let's say they've got an open source project that's not CNCF, you could still do an audit.
Absolutely, yeah. We're always open to helping open source projects out, organizations who maintain or foster these open source projects. We're certainly open to working with them.
So anybody out there with an open source project who thinks they can benefit, head
Yes.
on over to ostif.org and check it out.
Absolutely. Yeah, check out the website. We have all of our work on there, and we are relatively easy to contact. So, and just to conclude, you mentioned kind of where really the puck is moving towards, to use that idiom. It's changing. Security is indeed a moving target, and we are doing our absolute best to adapt with that and increase our service offering to projects, doing things like supply chain reviews, and fuzzing audits, and really incorporating all of that into the engagement. So it's a comprehensive engagement, kind of hitting all the different aspects of where the space is moving towards. So we're really excited. Excited to be back here. Thank you again. And
our pleasure, man.
Yeah, I look forward to the rest of the
maybe
conference.
we'll see you in Chicago. It's coming to
I'll see you
Chicago
there.
next.
That's right. Finally come in our hometown.
Very
I'll
cool.
see you there in
We're
November.
looking forward to it. November in Chicago. It's going to be windy.
Yes. Thanks again, everyone.
All right. Amir Montazeri from ostif.org. Check them out. We're going to take a break. We've got our next guest waiting in the wings. So give us a minute. We'll be back. Hey, everyone. We are still here amid the chaos of KubeCon in Amsterdam 2023. 10,000 people now starting to converge back onto the floor here because we have our opening night reception, I guess.
Yeah.
They'll be serving
the drinks
food.
all around. Everybody's bringing
drinks.
drinks in.
It looks like it's going to be a party.
It's a long night. It's supposed to go till 9 o'clock.
Yeah, I don't know if I'll be here till 9, but yes, it is. I'm getting too old for that, man.
We have to man the booth. So.
Well, God bless you. Let me introduce you to Emre Baran. Emre is with a company called Cerbos, and he's going to tell us all about that. But first, I want to hear his story a little bit. Emre, tell us about you, man.
So my background is, I started studying economics and very quickly realized that banking isn't for me.
Okay.
Even in my bank internship job, I found myself writing Excel macros, and I'm like, I got to go get back to school and do computer science. So after that, I graduated. I was a software engineer. I worked in telecom products in the US, federal governments, city government financial systems. And then after that, I built a social network, which became Turkey's largest social network.
Really?
And this was back in 2003, 2007. And then after we exited that, I joined Google as a product manager. I was a product manager on AdWords at AdSense. At some point, I worked on all the AdSense backend products. And after leaving Google, I moved to the UK. I started Qubit.com with my co-founders, a large enterprise retailer, marketing technology, A/B testing, product recommendations. And then after that, we started Cerbos. And the story is actually in every single one of these previous roles, I had to go build roles and permissions and authorization into software products. And every time we built it, we're like, why are we still building this? This is not adding any extra value, but it's a crucial thing to have. And with Cerbos, we're trying to address that challenge of never having to build permissions again so that we can provide that as off-the-shelf open source core for developers so they can focus on their core business rather than infrastructure.
Absolutely. I love that. Before we go further, Cerbos.io, Cerbos.com?
Cerbos.dev.
.dev?
Yes.
That's our first one
We also
today.
own Cerbos.io, Cerbos.co, and a lot of domains, but our primary audience is developers because we don't want them to reinvent the wheel.
I love it. So one of the things that we're, like a trend that I'm seeing here is when DevOps first came out, it was in some ways it made life harder for dev because it gave them like more responsibilities they had to worry about than just coding.
Yes.
Security, ops, testing, all of these things. But now what we're seeing is, platform engineer, SRE, these kinds of functions.
Specializations.
Yeah, but they're pulling back from saying, hey, dev, let me make this easier for you. Let me serve this to you on a platter.
So you don't have to worry about it.
So you do your thing.
That's absolutely the same trend we're on. And
Yeah,
the way that
that's
we
what
look
I
at,
see.
we call this the decoupleization, right? If you wrote software back in 1960s, you had to write your own database layer, you had to write your infrastructure, you have to write everything. But at 20 years at a time when we look at this, the databases that got decoupled. And then LDAP was the very first thing in security. The directory got decoupled, so nobody's building their own LDAP. Then authentication got decoupled. Log processing and security got decoupled, but authorization is still, the way that we look at this, is like developers doing it themselves. because there's a very fine line between your business logic and authorization logic. And not many people are thinking about what that API should be. So going back to what you were saying, a lot of developers find it much easier to do it in code than separating it out and actually making a thing on its own. However, by doing it a thing on its own, what you're enabling is like you're enabling all the bells and whistles to be added to that authorization thing. If you leave it to a developer, it's a very simple if then else statement. It's like if manager, he can do this. If a read-only user, they can only look at it, but they can't edit. However, all those requirements over time get very complex. They get much more complicated. All of a sudden, the developer is facing that same burden you mentioned because, hey, it was easy, now it got complex. Ooh, I wish there was a special software or specialization that took this off my plate.
Yeah, and I mean, here's the good news though, there is, and there are, right? And we're starting to see that. Impressions here at the show, what kind of feedback are you getting from people?
We're getting a great feedback. Of course, this is a developer event, but it's very much Kubernetes, a lot of infrastructure. However, that being said, as you mentioned earlier, there are a lot of developers who are in between infrastructure and software. Yeah. So we get a very great feedback. 90% of the conversations we've had are always around, oh, we had to build it ourselves. Oh, we had to revamp that. Oh, we have to do it. We need to go enterprise ready. So we're getting a lot of positive feedback into something that makes their life easier, especially when it's open source and it's free to put into your product.
Absolutely. Let's talk about that. How do you move people, not move people, that's the wrong word, excuse me. But how do people know I could use the open source product, it's fine for me? What's the defining line for the commercial?
So the commercial product we just launched, we announced it last week. So, it's a very fine line, right? How do you make a non-paid user into a paid user? However, our principle is if you're a developer, your default go-to is, oh, I can code that and write 3 lines of code. Right. We want to make sure that you never resort to that because you're getting into a big, big mess. You're in the beginning, you're not seeing what's coming your way. We want to make sure our product is as simple and as developer-friendly as possible to implement so they can get their job done. However, as a developer, you need to implement roles and permissions. But at some point, your role now starts extending into a DevOps role. Rather than just implementing roles and permissions, now, if you have to do your CI/CD pipeline for your policies, if you have to build a deployment pipeline, we offer that as a premium product. So you don't have to actually handle that. Similarly, as a developer, it's free and open source to write your own permission policies in YAML. You can talk to your product manager and convert those. But if you want to have empowered project managers managing their own policies, now we have a WYSIWYG interface for them that's premium for them to actually point and click and change. Similarly, for security teams, for CISOs, CSOs, CIOs, if a developer says, don't worry, I have a great relationship with my CISO, I can listen to what they need and I can run a report on the logs and give them the output, great, that's free. Mm-hmm. However, if you want to give the CISO a tool so they can do an audit, they can run a blast radius impact analysis of a change, they can do an analysis of who's over permission, under permission on their own without having to rely on developers, then that's a premium product. So at the end of the day, core developer, software developer things are part of open source, and the moment it starts jumping into other roles and empowering other roles, that's where we draw the line for premium commercial.
It makes a lot of sense, and it's certainly, look, I think the dominant model we're seeing today is, oh yeah, you can take the open source model, or we'll give you the hosted version. Yes. But quite frankly, the hosted version oftentimes doesn't have a lot of more bells and whistles. It's just hosted.
So with us, the core product is actually self-hosted, because authorization, unlike many other cloud services, needs to happen in sub-milliseconds because you're in the blocking path of every API request, every interaction with the product. Our cloud control panel is actually to manage all of those, your your hosted instances.
Love it. I think we covered a bunch here. I mean, is there anything we left out?
I mean, I would love to invite all the listeners, all the viewers to go check out Cerbos at cerbos.dev. And we have our Cerbos Cloud in private beta.
CERBOS.
Yes.
.dev.
CERBOS.dev. They can check out our open source core product there. They can also check out our new cloud offering, Cloud Control Panel.
Emery, thank you for
coming on. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Go check out cerbos.dev. Great open source and commercial product there. We're going to take a break. We've got a friend of ours waiting in the wings next. All right. Hey, everyone. We're back here live in KubeCon. I am happy to be joined by our friend Victor Gamoff. Victor's with, did I get your last name right?
Yes, you did this perfect.
Okay.
Because we're not doing this first time, right? So
I know, but you know, I speak to a lot of people. Victor is a friend of ours, but he also works at Kong. Sometimes he works in Florida. He stops in the office, but we haven't seen him lately.
Yeah.
Victor, man, hey, welcome to our KubeCon booth here.
It's great. It's great to be back on the road again. I guess last time it was like a reInvent or something like that. We see each other.
Vegas.
Yeah, Las Vegas. Yeah, now in Europe.
Vegas, I love Amsterdam. We've been having a great week here. It's Wednesday already. We've been here since Sunday.
Nice.
And so I've had a good time. Victor, look, not everyone. You're friends with us. You're not friends with everyone out here.
Hey, but. Victor Gamoff, developer advocate at Kong, talking about all things connectivity, microservices. And I've been in Amsterdam actually for like over almost like 10 days now.
Oh, really?
There was a conference the week before, Kotlin Con. They're also doing this in Amsterdam. I was speaking there about like microservices, Kong, Kafka, all the things, and quite enjoyed Amsterdam myself. It's my like a second time, but the first time when I actually can go and see the city. Usually people saying, "Oh, like you travel a lot for your job," and I was like, "Yeah, but like I see convention centers and airports and all these kind of things, you know." Now I had the chance to see the city, so I'm enjoying this as well.
You know what? That is something Victor, I discovered this years ago. I was tired of just knowing what the hotels and the airports and the conference centers look like. And I always stay an extra 2-3 days. Just for that reason, to get to know the city. And then sometimes I'll go to other cities nearby, because how often are you out this way, right?
Yeah.
So if you're in Amsterdam, go see Rotterdam.
Yeah.
Right? Or you're in Europe like this, you jump on a train and go to Prague.
Yeah.
Or, anywhere. But
yeah.
It's a really nice thing. Anyway, though, but it's nice that we're telling about our personal travel and experiences. Let's talk a little bit about what Kong has got going on here at KubeCon this year.
Yeah, actually this year we have some big announcements around our managed platform for managing the API in the cloud, API platform in the cloud, and specifically around Kubernetes. Like Kong runs in Kubernetes in like natively, like for many years. We have an ingress controller that transform Kubernetes native configurations into Kong configurations, so your APIs that runs inside Kubernetes will be exposed. Now we wanted to provide like a unified way how you can also govern all these kind of things, and the platform for doing this is Kong Connect, managed service that is controlling and collecting all sorts of information about your APIs, displaying it in a nice way. There's like Service Hub where your services are published, developer portal where the consumers of APIs can get this, get access, and all things around, say, how you can enable developers to get like a developer keys and things like that. So basically a platform for building your own like API platform.
I love it. You've been you've been in Amsterdam, but today was kind of the first day of this. What's your impressions? What are you seeing? What are you hearing?
Yeah. So a lot of questions actually coming from the users of Gateway API, which is essentially kind of a replacement or like a next generation of Kubernetes ingress. And so many people come in and asking like for support of this. And we were like spearheading this for a while because one of the engineers that works at Kong, they're also part of the special interest group about networking. Like Gateway API essentially changes the way how the people approach exposing the services to outside of Kubernetes. HTTP route, TCP route, gRPC route. gRPC route is going into alpha mode of the API, and it's quite nice. So you don't have to kind of like put some annotations on top of your standard ingress. You just have a gRPC route. This is your service that runs inside Kubernetes, and it will be available through managed or unmanaged gateway. Managed gateway, essentially the one that will be provisioned on demand, and unmanaged is that like, it's already available there. We're just configuring this unmanaged gateway.
Excellent, man. Let me throw you a curve.
Yeah.
So, look, you can't walk more than 3 feet without talking about AI today.
Yeah.
How do you think AI fits into some of the stuff you're doing at Kong and what we're seeing?
That's a very good question. And like, show me that company that didn't pivot their like product roadmap by not including some like API stuff. One of the things that I started using is to showing how you can, get access to the like OpenAI APIs via Kong, and specifically, they have a different models that you can run your text generations. And some of the models are based on the price, and the price is based on the knowledge. So they have, say, Da Vinci model was quite sophisticated model before GPT-4 was released.
Yeah.
And before that, there was like a Curie model that is a little bit less smart, let's put it this way, but it was cheaper. And like in order to like companies to use this API, you can have different tiers that that people can use. And API Gateway helps to put this API economy things in front of this. So one of the things that I showed how people can have, say, for production use case, you can use Da Vinci, which is going to be more expensive, so you need to have a different API key to do this, and how you configure in your organization. Or for development use cases, you can have like a Curie model. It works for some of the use cases, gives some of the answers faster, even faster, and you can configure this how the different people in the organization can access to those APIs. But of course, one of the things that we trying to look in future is to improve our documentation, or maybe even have some sort of like a bot that will be answering some of the Stack Overflow questions or answering questions.
Of course, the problem is that means you've got to upload that information into the GPT.
Yeah.
And then who knows, what people will do with it.
Yeah. So I think there's again, it's also we're going into interesting topic about like API monetization and API economy. So when you're using like with the chat, the application, this application itself is a research project. So they can do whatever they want with this data. But if you doing this through API, there's a strict SLAs, what they share, what they not share, and like having the the tools around API and how you can use their API within your organization by fronting this with the API gateway. Do transformation requests, make sure that some of the data will not leak. You will be able to do this, and with the API gateway to transform the request, strip out some of the data that you don't want to land in the open API. So it's great for us as a provider of tools to have another very, very, very big player in the API world, and we can show how we can work this with the gateway.
Speaking of API, I don't know if you saw the news today, Akamai bought an API security company, Neosec.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you saw that.
So Neosec was a partner for a long time for Kong. We have like a joint solution where Kong's the Neosec can integrate with Kong to do say, machine learning on the requests and telling if it's like a malicious, or maybe it's some sort of attack or whatnot. So yeah, that's pretty nice for them.
So now it's Akamai.
Yeah.
New partner.
New partner, new possibilities. That's incredible.
There's a lot of possibilities.
Yes.
They're a great company as well.
Yeah.
Great company. Victor, we're almost out of time. Kong, is it Kong.io or Kong? I forgot.
KongHQ.com.
Right.
And try our managed service. If you're running Kong Ingress in Kubernetes, it's very easy to kind of like a transition and have a nice UI available in the free tier. Everyone can like benefit from getting their Kubernetes services documented, published on the Service Hub, available through developer portal. So check this out.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure.
It's always pleasure to be here.
Come to Florida.
Absolutely. That's going to be my plan for this year.
You'll come see us. Victor Gama from Kong here on Techstrong TV. We are wrapping up. I think we have maybe one more or not interview today, and that'll end our day one coverage. One more, and then we'll be, of course, back tomorrow with another full day of coverage here in Amsterdam.
Hello, and we're back at KubeCon plus Cloud Native Con Europe, and we're talking with Kevin Bocek about workloads and their identities. Kevin, welcome to the show.
Mike, great to be here. We're closing out the show. It's
This
us
is it.
and then beer.
This is the last one. You're standing in between me and a beer. Is that what you're saying? You guys announced at the show an ability to attach identities to workloads. What does that mean? How does that maybe help with the whole zero trust conversation that people are trying to have? You know, walk me through what's going on with this.
Well, when you think about cloud native, I like to think about it as like identity required technology, because it's been built to run anywhere. Your cloud, my cloud, their cloud, which means that we got to know what's good or bad, friend or foe. And that all comes down to identity, which in the case of machines is machine identity. That's things like TLS certificates, SPIFFE IDs, code signing certificates. And what we announced today was Firefly. It's a new product, Venafi Firefly. And it brings machine identities close as possible to the workloads, close as possible to the applications. What we see is developers and engineers, they've been trying to do it the old-fashioned way. They've been trying to make their secrets manager issue certificates that are close to the application. They maybe even try to use an old-fashioned PKI. That's slow. It requires some infrastructure. It requires managing state. And Firefly now makes it easy. As the name says, Firefly, it comes and goes. So it's a machine identity issuer that issues TLS certificates, SPIFFE IDs. You can spin up 50, 100, 1,000 of them, and they live only as long as the workload. They actually only run in memory. So they come and they go, they issue. You're able to use those identities for authentication, like mutual TLS authentication, if you can use it with service mesh. The great thing, though, then, is also for the security teams. Because security teams have been a bit in the dark, actually really in the dark, when it comes to cloud-native identities. Firefly just doesn't make it easy for the platform teams to build. It gives the security teams the observability now and policy control. So they get to bring the same enterprise policy that they've been using in traditional workloads or web services, and Firefly automatically inherits that. It gets it actually from the control plane that's running in the cloud. So developers love it. Security team is sitting back with smiles.
So is this specific to cloud native workloads, but so does it also work with legacy workloads and monoliths and whatnot, or is it really about microservices and those types of workloads?
Yeah, we are at KubeCon, but there is a world outside of KubeCon.
Shocking.
Yeah, so it works not only in a Kubernetes cluster, it not only works with service mesh, but it can run anywhere that a Docker container can run. So that could be as an Amazon instance, it could be in Azure, it could be running back in your data center at not just in Kubernetes. And we support, so the engineers here are going to get smiles, we support gRPC, GraphQL, and REST interfaces. In addition to, it works with Istio and also with Cert Manager. Cert Manager is the de facto way that you get certificates inside of Kubernetes. So yeah, it works there and everywhere else.
Will we get a more resilient approach to certificates? Because every now and again you'll hear a story about somebody didn't renew a certificate and the whole thing crashed and it was because of some renewal issue. So in your approach, can I automate that process a little bit more? Can I make sure that the certificates are running and that they're up to date?
Hey, I used to be a software engineer, and let me tell you, I wasn't dreaming of machine identities of certificates on the weekend. So, yeah, it absolutely brings a more consistent, more reliable, and actually safer experience for the developers, but also for the security team, because they get one way of now bringing a machine identity issuer close to the application, whether that's in Kubernetes or in the cloud, in the data center. So you can spin up Fireflies wherever you want to. The architects now, they're happy because Fireflies work with my service mesh, it runs with my mutual TLS applications for authentication in the cloud, all one way, but multiple applications. And that then means more reliable, because it brings the policies from the control plane that the security team have set up that actually now they're going to support. So the configuration errors, the expirations go away. But also too, if you think what are security teams really worried about, they're worried about unauthorized access. So the policies now around authentication that these identities are used for, like TLS certificates with mutual TLS or SPIFFE, under the control of the security team, it's approved. So the risk now of unauthorized access goes down, and it goes down even exponentially more because Fireflies only live for as long as the workloads live. And that's something that's really, really different. In the past, with a secrets manager or maybe old school PKI, those certificates have lived well beyond the workloads, which opens the opportunity for an adversary to get them and get in.
Everywhere you go, somebody is talking about zero trust, and everybody nods their head as if they know what that means and what it's about, but it's not really something you can go out and buy per se, it's more of a philosophy. When you peel it back though, it seems like identity is at the core of zero trust, so do you think that what we're really doing is moving beyond traditional network security at the perimeter level and getting more granular down to even the workload identity, and is that part of what's happening here?
Yeah, I mean, zero trust is just always authenticated down, all the way down as you can, as close as possible to the application. And that's what Firefly is absolutely meant to do, bring the identities as close as possible to the application as possible, and also make it easy, because that's what architects and consistent engineers really want. So it's a big enabler for zero trust. It allows you to get now always consistent authentication, whether that's you're running in Kubernetes, you're running a service mesh, you've got cloud workloads that are using mutual TLS. Yep, it's consistent, and you're not opening the door though, because I could think, I'm going to bring certificates to every workload, but then you use an old-fashioned way of doing it. That actually could open the door, the possibility for more risk, whether unreliability from things like expirations or an attacker finding them well beyond the workload's life. And yet, Firefly, as the name implies, comes up, goes away, and big zero trust enabler.
As we kind of work this through, who's in charge of this stuff these days? Is it the developers or the security teams or somebody else for that matter? Who's leading the charge?
Ultimately, the security team is responsible because they're responsible for security. That's their job. They're responsible for defending the business. The engineers and platform teams are making decisions about technology to use. Do we use Cert Manager? Do we use Istio for service mesh? What flavor of Kubernetes? We're going to use OpenShift, or we're going to use EKS and Amazon, or all the above? And the security team then needs to make sure that that's safe. No security team is going to make the decision about which flavor of Kubernetes to use. That's going to be the engineering and the platform teams. So security is accountable and responsible for making sure the identities are safe, the containers, the workloads are authenticated. That's their job. And yeah, Firefly really fits with that. I think the challenge is, though, for security teams is that technology is changing so quickly. I mean, look at the projects that you see here at the CNCF. There's a new project that seems all the time, every letter in the alphabet and more. And that's really tough for security teams to keep up with. And so they're hungry to find ways to first get observability, just what is being used, and then how can we bring policies that we've been using at keeping the business safe into the cloud native environments. And that's what we've been working on with Firefly. It's what we've been working also on with our offering TLS Protect for Kubernetes. Get visibility first for security teams, get policy control, but don't change what the platform engineering teams are using. Let them use what they love.
As you think this through for a minute, you described the identity travels with the workload. Essentially, workloads don't move all that often, but when they do move, it's a pain.
Right.
How does it do that? How does the identity remain attached to the workload?
Right. So you're issuing identities to workloads, and the old-fashioned way was that you'd have an application here, and the issuer of the identity would be all the way back in the data center, across networks, and of course,
some sort of certificate authority somewhere. And
those would live for years. I mean, certificate authorities, the old-fashioned way, are measured actually in decades. So the idea now is, and what architects and platform teams want to do is, not only do you get the applications, the workloads, but all the services that enable them, get those as close as possible. So, for example, with Firefly, when your workloads come up in Kubernetes, they're requesting machine identities, TLS certificates. Your service mesh is making requests inside of the control plane for certificates. And then you might have applications that work out in Google Cloud, and they're using something like gRPC to talk with Firefly. But it's literally right next to, it can even be in the same cluster, issuing those machine identities. And that's something really different than in the past. We had to go all the way back in time, like a time machine, back to the 1990s.
So how does that certificate get recorded? If it's close to the workload and the app, then how does something externally validate the certificate is working?
So Fireflies, when you spin them up, they connect back to the cloud control plane, the Venafi control plane. They register themselves, and then they become authenticated with an issuer, an issuing certificate. That all gets recorded back in the cloud. And that establishes then authentication, because it comes actually enterprise approved. All of those different places where you're going to be performing authentication actually already has those trusted certificates. So that's how Fireflies can spin up and down, and when they go away, they're no longer able to issue identities for authentication, but all of that is recorded in the cloud and distributed out to applications.
All right, folks, you heard it here. Fireflies are the new way to manage certificates. Kevin, thanks for being on the show.
Thanks, Mike. Great to see you.
Good to see you. Hey, guys, thanks for spending the day with us. It's been an awesome, exciting adventure in terms of content and new ideas and new thoughts. And guess what? We're going to do it again tomorrow. So tune in. We'll see you guys later. Thanks for spending the day with us.